All right. We are doing communicate in the industry this morning, and uh, it's really like the basics of what we will be doing. And as I said, and I still trip over that word industry, it's services, it's humans we're working with. And so in communication, so it's kind of, where our heart is at and where we build relationships and how we serve people. So it's the foundation really of the course. And yeah, I'm sad for the ones that are missing today because they, missing that sort of real introduction to it. Um, and I will try to do it. Sometimes I rumble on and I think I'm going too fast, so I'm trying to relax and ease into it. So I really want you guys to relax and really enjoy it, and really feel like you're part of it. So just emergency procedures, we really just have one door where we come in. So if there's anything, we'll have to go out there. So we'll just have to walk out calmly. Mobiles, so just switch your mobiles on silent. I don't mind if you need to take a call. We are grown-ups. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, you have to go move your car. So just, yeah, that's fine. We'll take a break. Just, so put your hand up and I know, and we'll just take a break. That's no worries. So like I said, this is adult education. So I know we all have, things to do and places to go and things, it's always a bit complicated to get through things. So I'm all in for trying to help you through in whichever way possible, as I said, So yeah, and if you have to take a call, take a call. Don't even have to ask me, take a call, and you have to do what you have to do. So break times, I normally gauge and see how we're going. If you start falling asleep, then I think, okay, it's time for a break. But normally around 11, we'll have a 15-minute break, and we'll try to finish by lunchtime. Because I know there's moms that have to pick their kids up, and besides, your brains will be so by lunchtime that you're like, no, I can't take anymore. You're scheduled to be here until 3. You're welcome to stay back and sit and read if you want to use that opportunity. And, if you want to be quiet here, sit and read, pick my brain. I'm here all day. I'm here every day, all day. I have class every day from 9 till 3. But I'm available every day from 2 till 5. No, my classes are finished, so I'm available in the afternoons. If you want to come and pop in, you're welcome to just come and pop in and come and sit here and do your work. On Tuesdays, when we do the assessment part of it, if once I've given you all the page numbers and stuff, you're welcome to stay back and fill in as much as you can on the assessments. Jerry is a very good friend of mine, and she was one of my students last year, and I'm so blessed that she will be helping you guys on the other side. She's just an amazing person, absolutely amazing. And have you all met her yet? Yeah. So she's not really clued up with Axiom's course, but she's clued up with the with the, working and and she's been around for doing a lot of different things through her lifetime in any way. So I still learn from her. So if you are a smoker, I just want to ask you if you could just go far away from the building, maybe walk down the road or something under the trees, because they're really strict about smoking inside the buildings, around the buildings. And this is interactive. So if you've got any questions, we try to, I'm trying to set up a camera where we're going to get a Zoom camera where you can be part of the Zoom as well and part of the recordings, but not so much that. It's more about when you do give input to the course that it's not just a white noise, for the person listening online or on the recording, that they can actually hear your voice and can hear what you're saying. But I haven't sorted that bought some earphones and been struggling to sort that out, but we'll get there. But please, if you've got something to share, we learn from each other as well. So that's really important. And then I always say this is a safe space. If you share something intimate, you will see as we go through the course, there's some real sensitive subjects we'll be talking about. And sometimes, it really touches, or you might really share something intimate about yourself or where you work. Sometimes I have students that are already working somewhere and I touch on something that happens at work and they say, yeah, that's happened to me. And then I just want us to feel confident that whatever we share here sort of stays here. We don't talk about it later because that's part of the practice of going into working with our clients and working in the services, that what we share and what they share with us is confidential. And this is like the introduction into going into workplace. And there will be industry people coming around, coming to share with you guys. So, it's treated like as if it's a workplace and as if it's a work situation. Um, because yeah, we share, and then if that person says, oh, I'm working too much hours and I'm tired and they treated me like this or they treated me like that, and then you go and tell somebody else and somebody else goes and tells her boss and then she loses her job or something like that. So we'll just try to keep it confidential because yeah, or like I share a lot of my personal things. I'm not, I don't share it because you know, I'm worried that you guys will share it with anyone. That doesn't really matter to me. I'm an open book in some ways, so I don't care really. It's. Yes. Yeah. Yes, of course there is, and I've got this little sticker up here. It's coming off. I've got another one on it. That's about suicide prevention, and if you feel you need the need for that, yes, and very much so. I mean, there is if somebody shares with you that they've been abused or that yeah, they might want to hurt themselves or hurt somebody else, we do have a legal responsibility to share that with the appropriate somebody, whether it's a doctor or a nurse or calling the ambulance. Yes, by all means. And that would be the same here as well. If one of you come and say, really, I feel like killing myself and life is not worth it, I would feel the obligation to say, but obviously we'll share with one another and say, well, is it okay if I call somebody that's more qualified than what I am to help you with this? I can listen to you and help you, but only that far. Our abilities obviously only goes that far. Sometimes we do need some extra help. So yeah, I'll share this really good. So just with that, and that's the ground rules basically. I know, Axiom is trying to up the standard as well. So that's why they've asked that you guys wear your t-shirts when you come here and treat it like a workplace. And you just hanging around the front door or hanging, I've had some students sitting with their bottoms hanging out over the flower beds and taking photos or doing whatever, some strange things sometimes people do. We do get a lot of different clients coming in here. Uh, the trainer next door, he does training for horticulture. He also does training for the guys that comes and does the asbestos. So there's some big boys coming in here sometimes. I mean, from the industry, people come first aid, all sorts of different people. There's obviously bosses coming out and coming to talk to students all the time. So Yeah, we have a responsibility. This is not purpose-built for a college. This is just offices we are renting. So, you know, it's not like a type where they have areas where people can go and have meals and, you know, so it's not really purposeful for that. So unfortunately not. It's a very small building as well. So we all try to fit in here. So that's just the ground rules for Axiom, and they just expect us to have it standard, you know, the same as in the workplace, really. I mean, your boss would also expect that from you, and you'd be pulled up if you don't do that. I'm going to put my little clicker. So, any questions so far? No. Here's my screen now. Okay. So, chapter 1 in communicate in the healthcare industry. Before I start off, I'm going to play you a little video just as an introduction.
I'm passionate about compassion in healthcare because I believe that compassion is the one thing that we can be focusing on to change culture within the NHS. So what is compassion? Well, compassion is that feeling that we all experience when we know that there is somebody that really cares for us. Compassion comes from that moment when we can see the world through another person's eyes. In healthcare, I believe that it comes from people who love their work and who truly understand why they do what they do.
Compassion is about treating patients with dignity, respect, and empathy through your communication skills and through your actions.
It doesn't take very much. It can be a very small gesture that the nurse can do. I've only this morning dealt with a lady that had come about 10 miles on the bus. She was elderly. She was a living type of problem to have hospital transport. She made her own way here. When she came in, she was cold. So a cup of tea, 2 biscuits, and she was much, much happier. And that little thing really does make a difference. I think it's particularly powerful when we are feeling vulnerable in physical or psychological pain, or when we are afraid.
My son is bedbound for 6 weeks, so boredom is a big factor. So if he was just left alone in this room, he will deteriorate, become sort of depressed almost. So the nurses come in, cheery faces. They ask quite often, you know, do we need anything? Even the dietitian comes in, they'll try and encourage him to eat by sort of giving him star charts, gold to aim for, so they're trying to encourage him to get better.
The consistent theme is that it is always the smallest things that make the greatest differences.
You hear so many stories nowadays about people being treated as a number, and it's my experience that the professionals that are looking after me really do seem to care about what's happening, what they can do about it, and keeping me informed as to how they're doing it. And once you have that information, that empowers you then to obviously deal with it as best way you can.
And not only that, it's all the staff, even the canteen staff, how good they are as well.
Compassion isn't just about talking to the patients, it's making them feel safe in a nice, clean environment where they can feel at home.
They've really been so kind to me. Will make me come to the door all the time. I might be a bit anxious or something. They should sort me out.
So I see compassionate care being delivered when the staff themselves feel cared for. When they feel free to speak openly, free to fear, when they work together as a team and trust each other. I think that the most valuable gift that we can give each other and to our patients is giving time. Time to allow the patient to speak about what matters most to them. And most importantly, time for the staff to listen.
I think you have to show genuine interest in the patient without being judgmental. Try and find out a little bit more about their lives, their beliefs, their values, in order to empower the patient to be able to make decisions about their rehab and the goals that we're going to set together.
They often divulge all sorts of different things about their worries at home. It might be who's going to walk my dog, what my medicine faster. And it's things like that that we can help to facilitate arrangements that make a big difference to how they experience their care.
I believe that if we focus our attention on things that matter most to our patients, then we will gain
doing their absolute best. This trust will improve clinical outcomes, will improve financial outcomes, will empower patients to improve their quality of life, would reduce their dependency on their system, and improve morale of our staff. This has to be our number one priority.
So the objectives in this unit is to discover how to communicate effectively with people, to know how to collaborate with our colleagues, to learn how to address constraints in communication, to understand how to report problems to our supervisors, to ascertain how to complete work, place correspondence and documents, to identify how to contribute to continuous improvement, and to gain the skills and knowledge required for this unit. So that's the 5 chapters in chapter 1. Chapter 1.1, use non-verbal communication to enhance understanding and demonstrate respect. So verbal communications are clear, concise, consistent, credible, courteous. So when we talk about, yeah, it's all in there. So yeah, and you know, as we're going through the answers tomorrow, if you, any one of you would ever want the slides, you're welcome. I can email you the slides. So yeah, so with verbal communication, when we talk to each other, we have to be really clear about what we are sharing about. It's sometimes really hard, and our next unit will be on diversity. And we talk a bit about it here as well, where we use different, we all have different accents. I'm from Namibia, I'm from Africa. So I have the African, you know, accent, and I have changed over the time, but you know, try to speak clearer, and that's sometimes you adopt the accent a little bit of the country where you go, so people understand you better. I really struggle still with the number 30. Everyone hears 50 when I say 30. But this, you know, that's with clear communication. When quite often there's quite a different variety of people we work with, people from all sorts of cultures. In the aged care industry, we work with a lot of Filipinos and Indians, and they all have thick accents, and they, you know, sometimes swap their words around, and you know, it's up to us to actually go back to them and say, oh, could you repeat that? Make sure that you understand each other well. Be consistent in your communication with your clients as well. It's important to, like they were saying on the video, to build a rapport with them, get to know them, you know, really be like close to them. When you achieve that, when your clients trust you, you'll be able to do things with them that no one else can do. You know, they'll be willing to go with you and go to the bathroom with you and do personal care with you because they trust you. It's like a little child, really. If you just go grab them and, you know, and say to them, come with me, they'll start screaming because they don't know you. So you have to build a rapport with them, you know. Adults are more, you know, preserved and more withdrawn, and that's it. They won't scream if you just come and take their hand, and, you know, but when you have young disabled adults, or you have an elderly person, they surely might react in, you know, in a negative way if you just come and, you know, grab them without building a rapport with them first. So that's where, you know, it's part of being courteous, just getting to know somebody properly. So non-verbal communication, you know, obviously the written things, but our facial expressions are also non-verbal, our body postures, the way we hold ourselves, gesture, eye contact. And that's different from culture to culture. Some cultures don't like to be looked in the eye like straight all the time. They like feel that's a challenge or something. Touch. I love hugging. You know, I really have an issue with that. But the old people love that too. Yeah, I'm an aged care nurse. I've been an aged care nurse for many years. So I love hugging. Hugging and kisses. I always say that's my currency, you know. I always go, oh, how can I pay you? You know, I said, just pay me in hugs and kisses, you know, that's my currency. Also the tone of our voice, it really makes it, you know, that's not part of our non-verbal communication. Eye contact, facial expressions, tone of voice. Chapter 1.2, communicating the service and information in a manner that's clear and easily understood. When communicating, we always sort of think about it. The idea occurs. We plan what we might, going to say to somebody, especially if you're going to go see your boss about something. You might sit and think it through. What do you want to say to them? Sometimes, some of us, I'm an extrovert, so I'm thinking as I'm talking. Some people, introverts, they plan a little bit more. Idea occurs and they work on it and think through what they're going to say, and then they say it. Then the message is sent. At this point, you talk to somebody in the form of speaking or writing or, other languages, braille or something. Then the message is received by that person and they hear the words you are saying, and then they decode that message. So this is a vital stage of the communication cycle where other people has now to interpret what you've said. So this is not always easy, as the person may make assumptions about your words or your body language. You might say something, but the way you say it might be. And I always say, it's my husband's doing this course. You guys might have met him on Friday. He's coming from the mechanical side, and he's going want to eventually become a trainer in aged care or in disability care. But we've been married for 25 years, and I still misunderstand. We still misunderstand each other, and we know each other so well. So how much more do we misunderstand each other if we don't know each other that well? And I still make assumptions of things he says that is not, and then you'll say, "Oh, I didn't, I didn't mean it like that," or "I didn't say it," don't we? And we're like, he just looks at me a certain way. Don't look at me like that. And I didn't look at you like anything, And we make assumptions and misunderstandings occur when we know each other very well. So that happens even more so when we don't know each other that well. So that's all part of communication. And that's the message understood, the final stage of communication cycles, when the message is understood and they're able to communicate effectively. And we actually feel that we've been heard, or that, they understood what we said. And this is a picture of that happening. So my husband's British and I'm Afrikaans. So I come from a Dutch background. And so when we first got married, the British like their food separate. I don't know if you know, they like their carrots and their peas and their roast and their roast potatoes all like separate like this. And Afrikaners, we like our food in a pot all thrown in the So it's just little cultural differences. Sometimes it's even things like the way you cut your bread, the way you put the toothpaste on your toothbrush. That is a yeah, all different ways. Or all down, So that's that cultural filter, and it's sometimes it can be even within, like from family to family. When it comes to, and I do that next week when I'm doing cross-cultural communication or the cultural unit, that from family to family we misunderstand each other, because the one family, the mum is taught, I'm always amazed with the way my mum used to hang the washing on the line to the way I hang the washing on the line to the way my sister hangs the washing. We all came from the same household, but we all do it differently. And I get really annoyed when my mum used to hang the washing on the line because of the way she did it. And I felt, no, that just makes my job harder because of, it creased, and I like folding my washing up as I take it off the line, and like hanging it up straight away. I hate ironing. And, so I'm, as I said, work smarter, not harder. I don't like throwing things in a bucket and then, yeah, okay, maybe it's better because the sun is hot out there if you come and do it inside. But I saw that little thing on Facebook yesterday again where it says, takes an hour to do the washing and a half hour to hang it up and maybe a half hour to take it down and 3 weeks to put it into the cupboard. Yeah. So we all do that. That bucket gets into the house. Yes, yes. And so, but that's the cultural filter, which could sometimes be from family to family, the way our mum taught us to do something. And then we interpret whatever somebody says to us through that filter. And, you know, sometimes the way we hold our face or the way we, you know, communicate might be misunderstood because of that filter. Because that's, you know, the Germans bang on the table when they're happy and they you know, and they saying thank you or they, you know, greet each other, and we might see that as a sign of aggression. I've often heard people saying as Afrikaans we're very loud, and when we together as a group we talk very loud, and people think we're aggressive with each other, but it's just the way we are because of the, I suppose it's a bit of the German Dutch background that comes through, and that in our talking that we sound very aggressive when we talk. So it's the things that influences the way we see things and hear things. So confirming the person's understanding we work with. And then there's these barriers. It's similar to the barriers with the, you know, the cultural barriers, use of jargon. And the industry, if you work in a specific industry in this, like working with an aged care, disability care, there's a lot of catchphrases or a lot of terminologies, acronyms that we use that might be a bit confusing, or there's a whole lot more to it when you just say one phrase, like individual support. It in itself means a lot of things, you know, it's not just a word, it's like it carries us in what we do. So then there's emotional barriers and taboos, those forbidden words, you know, emotional barriers when you work with people with dementia. They can't get the words, and then they get frustrated and they say something different. You get an old lady that's forgotten some of her language and she wants to tell you she's beautiful, and she comes and she says, your breast, and she's actually trying to say to you, you're beautiful, but because it's a forbidden word and that's the only words that she's got left, she uses that, and we are highly disgusted about that. But instead of seeing that, oh, that was a forbidden word, you know, like the word, you know, you only say that when you slam your finger in the door and your mum gave you a hiding when you said it, and then that got put right behind. And then when you get dementia, that's sometimes the only word that's left, you know, because that was so well tucked away. Lack of attention, of course, the differences, and then the physical barriers. People that's blind, people that's deaf, um, people that are, you know, have got mental disabilities that don't have that cognitive understanding, language differences, you know, just, yeah, I'm speaking a different language at home as well. You know, we work in Mackay, we've got people, German people, we've got Italian people, we've got people from Malta, Maltese people. There's a lot of different cultures, the older people, and then we're not even talking about all the young Filipinos and Indians and all the other, you know, cultures that are in Mackay. A lot of Afrikaans people in Mackay as well. So there's this language barriers, and then of course expectations, and you know what the prejudice, like our prejudice towards people, and cultural differences. Those are all barriers that we might experience. I've worked with older people that have lost their language or lost the English language and gone back to their, you know, mother tongue. Italian ladies that only speak Italian. You know, they might have spoken English somewhere. I've had an old Islander lady, and she's gone back to just speaking Creole. So, you know, her family had made a little list for us to try to talk to her, but she could understand English, so she was really, you know, quite cute. And when I was with her alone, and then she'd answer me in English, you know, just she just sometimes just played with people like that because, you know, she could, yeah, she just, because she could. So, confirm, there's one word there, ripper, which is an Australian word, isn't it? Which is something absolutely delightful. And, you know, if you told me, oh, you a ripper, when I just came to Australia, I might have taken it as an insult, you know. Might have thought that you said something rude to me, you know. So sometimes there's, and when we came to Australia, there was a lot of words that was unfamiliar. And I thought, oh, what does that mean? You know, what the heck are you talking about? The first one that got me was roadside assist. And I thought, why don't they just finish the word? It's roadside assistance, you know, it's not just that. And then I realized the words all like cut off, you know, or shortened, which is just the thing you do, you know. Yeah, it's just the thing. And you get used to it and you become, you know, you start doing it yourself. I think sometimes my family listens to me from Africa and they think, what's on with you? Why are you talking so funny, you know, because you adopt the way people talk so they can understand you as well. So listen and request and clarify the meaning and respond appropriately. It's called active listening and mirroring back to people what they're saying or catchphrases and paraphrasing the words that to repeat what have been said, you know, to say back to them. Collaboration and confrontation. Collaboration is the coming together of two or more people to work together for the mutual benefit of all involved. And then quite often we have confrontation where there's one or more person who come together and clash or disagree on a subject. And whenever I see this word confrontation, I can't help myself. My son was in year 11 and he called me from school and he said, Mum, can you come and get me? I've got a confrontation. He's a good boy. He never gets into a fight or anything. What happened now? So I rushed to school and I got there and he was there in the office. I went to fetch him, came out and he said, who did you have a confrontation with? At school, there's so many people there. He was constipated. I'm going to tell that at his wedding. It's a way nearby, yeah, that word. I just can't help myself. I still get the giggles. So that's that Afrikaans background mixture, you know, and he he's always spoken English because his dad is English, but, you know, he just got that word mixed up somehow. Exchange information that's clear and in a timely manner within the confidentiality procedures. So rules for keeping information confidential. We just, you know, generally we expect people to respect our privacy and keep our things confidential. And when we work with people and close and personal like that, it's so important that we keep whatever they share with us confidential. And they are going to share things with you that, you know, no one else knows about them, where they come from, you know, relationships, friendships, things they struggle with, that are really important that we keep it confidential, except, of course, if they want to, you know, if there's concern for their safety or safety for someone else. And I mean, this is demonstrated to us all the time when you phone somewhere, you inquire about something and, you know, you phone for your husband and you have trouble because you haven't got the right to speak to even Telstra or anyone else, you know, because of confidentiality. So I think we'll sort of understand that very well. So chapter 2 is collaborate with colleagues, and those are the 4 chapters in chapter 2. Are you all going? Are you still feeling okay? It's 10 o'clock. You go half an hour, we'll have a break, okay? Have to move your car.
I'm going to go and check and make sure it's not been now.
Yeah.
I got here 30 minutes early and put stuff in the car. Now I wish I didn't. I was going to move the car.
Oh, no, that's so good. Listen and clarify and agree with the time frames to carry out our workplace instructions. We are sometimes really under the pump. I work at Butcher the Lodge. still on the casual pool, so I do get messages all the time for jobs, shifts that's available. I've been back there twice this year. I went back in January, and this last month I went back for one shift. I was not able to go back that much more because I'm working here 5 days a week. But it's full on. When you're there, there's about 7, maybe a bit less now, because I've closed one of the wings in Cumberland House, which is the sort of the high tea area. But we have got near 60 odd residents in that area, and there's normally about 4 of us in the afternoon, and then we get an extra lady that comes in if we're lucky, extra 2 coming in between 4 and 8. So then there's 6 of us for half of the shift, and quite often people call in sick. So it is, you are running from one person to the next. It's full on. The pressure and what you're doing is just so full on. The time frames are so tight, and the expectations are so high. So carrying out workplace instructions and planning your work and communicating with each other is so vitally important. We need to communicate properly. Otherwise, we'll end up doing things twice, or somebody might not be able to. Old lady might not be able to say, "Well, I've already been to the toilet," because she's nonverbal or something, and somebody else had already taken her. So you're actually wasting your time, and you're frustrating her because she's already been, or So it's vitally important to communicate with each other properly. When you're going to be working with some disabled people, making sure they understand and making sure you've communicated back to your supervisor of what their needs are. Those are things that are really, really important in your job. And your bosses and your supervisors will be giving you instructions on goals to meet and how to write your notes and things. And you really have to be able to, understand and make sure you understand it correctly. So what tasks we need to do, the deadlines, the sequences and the tasks, the expectations and the length of the task. When you go into a home and community care, sometimes you have 15 minutes or 20 minutes to go and get somebody up and shower them and get them. And it's sometimes really, really hard because you're working with people and some days they're not up to it. They just, we can't rush them. Then you get them, they happen like acting out because they just feel uncomfortable or rushed. But just planning your tasks, really be like think it through before you go into somebody's room or their house of what needs to be done, what sequence are you going to do it in, just understanding the procedures and how to do it, the required equipment that you may need or required safety precautions that you may have to take, because sometimes you use machinery, you use stand-up lifters or full voice machines to lift people up or transfer them, and just everything that you might need to take to get that person up in the morning, get them ready, get all of that ready before the time, plan your steps. Instead of double handling and doing things over and over. When you roll somebody over, say they're in the bed and they've soiled themselves and the bed is a mess, you get everything ready and right near you, close to you. Yeah. 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 Everything needs to be ready behind you. Yeah. Because if you roll somebody over and you realize, I don't have a sheet, and you start halfway, and then you have to roll them back on the way and go and get it, put the bed back down, and it's really good to plan what you do all the time and get everything ready, because it does happen we're in such a rush, then we don't plan properly, but we actually make our job harder, because then you're halfway and it takes, I don't know, sometimes really long, 10 minutes to get that bed up, not really, but to get the bed to the level that you can work with it, and you realize I don't have everything. You can't leave the bed up with them on top. You have to let it back down again and go get what you need, So just plan your your work procedures. And I mean, yes, in the disability care, depending where you are, it's also different, you know. I mean, my daughter-in-law works for Phoenix. She's just started with them as well. And I think that's also different. She's got different types of clients. When you work with home, right at home, you've got different types of clients. When you work at your placements, they've got different types of clients. And then different types of disabilities. So you have to really sort of know who's your clients, you know, what are you going to do, and, you know, really plan your work. And that's all part of time management. Getting, finding somebody to help you, getting assistance. That can be sometimes a real issue if you're in a big facility and you have to try to get somebody to come and help you. We have an intercom system called Sarah, and we carry it around our necks, and we can call each other on it, which really helps if Sarah understands you. Sometimes she doesn't, so you know, I don't understand, especially if you're stressed. Yes, I mean, I don't know what happens. You talk faster, and then she just doesn't understand. Yeah, and finding somebody to help you, and planning and effective use of technology, and yeah, it's all just part of working smarter, not harder. You know, it's all just plan. You know, plan your day, plan what you're doing. Chapter 2.2. Identify lines of communication between organizations and other services when you work out in community. Your responsibility is so much more. You have to be able to communicate with the recording system staff, sometimes with the doctors, and you know, all the different specialists that might be involved in that person's life, whether it's an speech pathologist or occupational therapist. Sometimes we have to communicate. When you are in a facility, then the ENs and RNs does that. We don't do that. So it all depends on what the company's rules are, and they will tell you when you start working. Yeah, well, yeah, you do that. Somebody else does the, you know, the roles are different. But for sure, within a household or whatever, they, you know, sometimes you have to communicate. If you work with a young disabled person, you might have to communicate with the mum. Might have to, and you just have to always make sure that that person has the right to come in. No? I'm expecting two more people to come just now. So that, you know, that person might, they have to have the right for you to speak to them. So they need to be next of kin, or you know, somebody, a guardian or somebody. So when at Good Shepherd, we're not allowed to talk to the family as AIN. So I refer to us and myself as the AIN, which means assistant in nursing. And that means our first point of contact always is the nurse. We are their assistant. And secondly is the client. So your nurse are, you know, you always keep running back to them. But if you work in the community, you'll have supervisors you actually refer to as care workers, not assistant in nurses. But when you work in aged care, you will be referred to as that. It's the roles are the same. Although when you're in the community, yes, you have more responsibility. You know, you have to book appointments and take them to places, and we in the facility we don't get to do that. So that's all part of our scope of practice, and that would be different from company to company. But generally, our scope of practice is what we have been trained for. Okay, so whatever you've got your certificate for, and when you finish with this whole certificate, you would be able to do some things, but some things will be outside of our scope of practice. We do not learn how to do medication in this course. That's outside of the scope of practice. We don't learn how to do wound care in this course. That's outside of our scope of practice. We don't learn how to do injections, or, you know, even administer insulin, or take, you know, doing the sugar level tests and stuff. Some of those things can become part of your scope of practice when the company you work for do a little course with you to give you the skills to do it. But some things like administering medication, you actually have to have a Cert 4, which is a certificate over and above Cert 3. And I know there's a lot of companies out there making individual support workers do that. You can get into very big trouble if you do that, because it's outside our scope. We just don't know. These can be side effects on medication that we're not aware of, and then that person has a adverse effect there, and then from the medication, and you're not aware that that is from that. You know, you don't know some medications works against other medications. So if you give them the wrong medication at the wrong time, you can kill them. You know. So it's really outside of our scope of practice to do that, and I know this is a touchy point. I've had some of the what do you call it, companies, the bosses from the companies come to see me. Are they always looking for care workers? Do I have care workers? And asking me, do you do the medication module? The medication module is a Cert 3 module, but it's actually some of the modules we are doing, and you did that with your diploma, didn't you? Some of the modules like diversity and stuff like that is also part of Cert 4. So I'm doing a diploma at the moment, and a lot of the Cert 3 modules that I've done, I've actually got credits in on the diploma as well. So some of the modules goes over into being a diploma module, or depending on how it's structured, how it's put together with other modules. So the administering medication sits on our on training.gov as a Cert 3 module by itself, but it's not a Cert 3 module. It gets structured into a Cert 4 certificate when you're actually going to get that, because it's part of being endorsed. So you have to be registered to administer medication. And
what about barking and stuff? You know, if they go on an aged care, is that part of this course?
yes, yeah, yeah, yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. All the individual care you will be giving somebody, whether you're taking them, you know, shopping, or, you know, you doing personal care, all the personal care that's within our scope of practice. But we will be going through a lot of that, and, you know, a lot more, and, you know, so, yeah, so terminology and verbal and digital communication, the organization requirements for communication. So usually it refers to the communication of information between staff concerning the patient or an event or an issue or other workplace information. Now, just on that patient, ideal placement call the clients participants. Other places call them clients, other places call them customers. If they're in the hospital and you work in the hospital, it's a patient. If you're in the aged care facility, we still call them clients or residents. So it's all like a, you know, it's all the same person, really, the person you care for. Yeah, so the terminology is changing all the time. That with the new aged care standards, we've gone now to call them customers, and participants in disability care, putting the focus really on that the customer is always right, you know. So it's what the client wants. So it's that kind of mindset where in the 80s, when I did my nursing training, we called them patients, and it was a bit like rigid, you know. You get up at 6 o'clock and you get your shower and you go down to meal, and there's no, like, you know, choice really. You do as we say. Where now it's what they say that goes. Look, that is right. So it's client focus. So, but from organization to organization, there's different terminology. So they all use different things. I think at ideal placements, they call it case notes. And Good Shepherd Lodge, we call it progress notes. So it's all different. And a different place you might walk in, they might call it something different, you know, so it just depends on whatever they call it. So yeah, you'll get used to it, and you know, yeah. So these are the industry terminology. Always familiarize yourself with correct terminology that you use at your organization and the services that you provide. So you will get used to it, you know, what kind of forms and what kind of terminology. Some of the acronyms we are using, and we have some in our assessment as well, which are like ADLs, activities of daily living. You'll hear that a lot. That will be one of the main acronyms you'll get used to hearing a lot. Those are, you know, when you work in this disability, you have to train them how to do daily living activities. Things we do and take for granted, making ourselves a cup of coffee in the morning, making ourselves breakfast, making ourselves a sandwich, going to do our shopping, you know, doing our washing, cleaning our house. All of those are just general living activities. And some and quite often with this independent living where they place people in homes together. So you have 2 or 3 disabled people living in one home and they've got 24/7 care there. Part of your goals will be to try to teach them how to look after themselves, how to teach them how to use the washing machine and, you know, clean the fridge out. And so there's this constant training them how to do daily living activities. Bowels well open or bowels open, very important in aged care, and it's also very important with disability care. Quite often, a lot of the behaviors come from them not having their bowels open, and generally we have to report that every day. You know, that's quite an important thing to report because if obviously you know how you feel when you constipated, and when they constipated, they act out and weak of it. So we need to know when they haven't opened for a day, we need to know about it so the nurses can know, so the supervisors can know, so they can make a plan, you know, be ahead of bad behaviors. We all know doctor, BD twice a day, blood sugar levels, VGL, urine infection, UTIs. We do get a lot of UTIs in aged care. We've been toiling around with the reason why, because when you have little kids, they don't get UTIs that much, and they wear nappies and they pee in their nappies. So sometimes they say it's because, and if you think a little kid, you know, they make they have their feces in their nappies as well, and still they don't get infections from that. We don't really know. I mean, they've been saying, oh, it's the way the older people wipe because they don't wipe properly or they wipe the wrong way. Anyway, when somebody is like out of character, they're saying strange things, or you know, then usually we always do a urine test. Quite often it's that they've had a UTI or they're having a UTI, and that's why they are like acting up. Urine test is just a lipstick test, and you'll learn how to do that as well if it's needed where you're going to be working. And then sometimes you might have to take a urine sample, a MSU to send away, and that the nurse will say, can you take an MSU, which means you have to catch the urine while it's running in a clean raw container. So put a glove on and you try to get the container in place. Date of birth, yeah, basal blood pressure. Depending on where you're working, you might, you know, need to do some OPS, which is OPS is also an acronym, which is your blood pressure, temperature, urine tests, and things like that. Yeah, TDS 3 times a day. Yeah, urine samples, UAs, and then next of kin, that's another acronym. So this is all on page 38, but we'll be doing this anyways tomorrow because we have a question on this one. So just following communication protocols that apply to interactions of different people and lines of authority, there's always a chain of command where we work. It's a bit like the army, you know, we can't override an RN. You know, what they say goes. it's just like RN can't override the doctor. If the doctor decides to do something, you know, what he says goes. So there's that chain of command in our services. You know, we need to give account to whoever is above us. And that is all to do with the scope of practice. So the RN will be the one that can do medication. The EN does the medication. Sometimes the supervisor would be an RN or EN in that position. Not always. Sometimes you have a CN, which is a clinical nurse in that position, and they'll come around and, you know, oversee some things. Or you have a wound nurse going around if somebody has wounds and doing that, the dressings on that. It all just depends also what the organization policies and procedures is in regards to what is your responsibility. But they should send you for any extra training if they expect something from you that you haven't received within this individual support. They do, I think this week actually, and I keep forgetting to actually go and have a look at it. They have some courses going at the base on wound care and dental care, like courses. If you belong to the union, they'll send you also reminders out of courses happening. And that's all part of, you know, keeping up to date with what's happening. And, you know, and companies might need you to go and do that. And they'll put you in, sometimes the company will put you in touch with, you know, doing that extra training. Yeah, and then the written, verbal, and communication styles that's required, the documentation that we need to do. And I think let's have a break before we start chapter 3. We'll just give it a pause here. Yep. Okay, chapter 3. So chapter 3.1, identify early signs of potential complicated or difficult situations and report them according to the organization procedures. So we do quite often deal with behaviors of concern, and it is always good to try identify behavior of concern before it happens. We do have a whole unit where we talk about behaviors of concern and managing behaviors of concern. But yeah, when you work with disabled people, especially people with autism or, you know, any really mental disability, that you'll end up having some behaviors of concern, as well as people with dementia. That's why I say, you know, using this unit to work in aged care or work in disability support is really not much different, because older people are really just people without certain abilities, really. So it's just disabled people, but they're older, whether they've got hearing difficulties or they can physically not walk anymore, or dementia, which is, you know, like having autism or some sort of a mental disability. So although I've not really had much experience working with disabled people, I have worked in the aged care industry for many years. So I never shared with you in the beginning. I shared with you guys when I came there that day, that I have worked in you know, in aged care for 30 years, and I've worked in a few different countries and, you know, all over the world really. But yeah, I've you know, seen a lot, but I've never worked directly with disabled people. It you know, until I've done this course, it was really unfamiliar field to me. Although I've had in aged care, we've had a few Down syndrome, elderly people with Down syndrome, and then of course I've worked in dementia for 5 years, and sort of a young onset dementia where I've had elderly, younger people in their 50s with dementia. And from what I've gauged, I still haven't worked directly with disabled people, but from what I've gauged, from what I've heard and experienced in the class through a lot of my students working with disabled people, it is not really much different to working with, you know, elderly people with issues and stuff. So yeah, that's behaviors of concern, and it does become a large part of our job. When I worked in dementia and a Good Shepherd of 5 years, I worked in the high care dementia ward. It 90% of my work was to manage behaviors, watch them and know, and know before that, you sort of see when it's leading up to it, or gauging when somebody is on their way to go and bash somebody else, or somebody is on their way to go and trip over something, or something's going to go wrong. You always have to sort of keep your eye on everyone, know where everyone is, know what they're doing. And I think even working at your placements, I was training there, that same training room where you guys do your training on Fridays. I did 3 classes in there before. And there's some of the Celeste group, the younger disabled people that come through and work in the kitchen, or while we were training, they would be in the front area. And they've changed it a little bit there now. But then you got to know some of them, and got to know some of the youngsters. And I think quite a few of them actually got autism more than anything else, and some developmental issues. Yeah, and yeah, just also knowing, like, we would not take break at a certain time, as a class who know, because they're busy in the kitchen. So if we go in the kitchen when they're in there, it will cause behaviors, it will cause issues. So those kind of things, identifying those things, and just sort of being sensitive to it. Medical emergencies, if somebody's had a fall and they cut themselves or they bash their head, knowing that how to sort of report a situation like that, you always call the supervisor. You never pick somebody up on the floor. But we will talk about that quite a bit more through the course. Then there's environmental concerns. Quite often, especially working in the community, you go out to unfamiliar areas. You go into somebody's home you've never been there, unfamiliar setting, like you might even drive out somewhere into the sticks, and you've never been there, just having concerns on whether the home is safe, or whether the area is safe, not just for you, but for your clients as well. Short staff, that's a huge thing for Shepherd Lodge, in any ways it is. But I just had an email this morning from one of my students that works with one of the home care companies, and she was saying she's so overworked. So they're so overworked because there's not enough people, to fill the roles. And that's why there's you guys pretty much are guaranteed a job the minute you're ready for it, and you probably could already start working after week 6, week 7. On the condition that you do try to keep your training dates as unavailable. And I have put that condition down to some of the employers that's come in and, said, oh, please, have you got any students for us? And then I said, well, please, they have got training on these days. Please don't book them shifts on those days. And they land up, because they're so short staffed, they land up booking them on those days. So it's up to you to really put your availability in when you start working, because that's a legal document. When you fill the availability in, just say, I am not available. And one of my students, she put in on the availability. So she said, I'm not available on a Thursday. And I think she said she has to have the daughter on a Tuesday or something, not available on a Tuesday. And then she put on the availability. She's available morning, afternoon, and night time on all the other days.
Oh, no.
And you know what? They book in her morning shift, and then they give her an hour or 2 break, and then they got her back to working in the afternoon. They like really sucking the life out of her. So please be aware that there's such a shortage of staff. And look, it's not my fault. It's not my problem, and it's not your problem, and it's not your fault. Okay, Don't let anyone make you feel guilty because they work in short staff and make you feel obligated to be there. You know, we quite often, and I say that from day one, we get in there, and some days you'll get in there and you'll think, geez, I'm not getting paid enough. You know, because you'll walk into a situation where there's feces right up the wall and it's right all over the place and all over the clothes, and you like stand there and you think, where do I start? You know, and and guess what? That CN or that roster clerk that are booking you for the next shift is not there helping you cleaning that mess.
No.
So her problem with not having staff to pull a shift is not your mess. It's her mess. She's not going to be there to clean your mess. You're not responsible for her mess. Okay? Let her sort herself out. You just say, I'm sorry, I can't. You have to learn to say no in this industry. You have to learn to say no from day one. Because they know the suckers. They know the ones that can't say no. They spot you coming off a distance. Got this one little student, she's so lovely. Man, she doesn't see her daughter. She's got a 7-year-old, she doesn't see her. She goes to work before she wakes up, and some nights she doesn't even come home. Her mum's raising her child because she is constantly working. She's constantly out there. And, you know, it's just not the life. It's not worth it. You know, don't it, because you get burned out and you need to watch yourself. No one else is going to gauge you, you know. And when you start losing your relationships or things goes wrong with your children, then they're not going to be there to worry about it either. So, you know, watch yourself. And then we also, unfortunately, you most probably will face neglect and abuse. Because people with disabilities, you know, can be a burden to their family. Let's be real about it. And, you know, mums get to a place where they get frustrated, and family members get to a place where they're frustrated. Care workers get to a place where they're frustrated, and they take it out on the innocent and the vulnerable. And it's, you know, it's not right. It's never right. It's horrible, but it happens because people are tired and frustrated, because they're overworked. You know, last year when that young man came on the 7 news on the night, you know, like all over the news, abusing that old man and hitting him with something in the bed. You know, that it's disgusting that happens. But guess what? That man's probably completely overworked and has had one slap too many from that client, and then he landed up reacting like that. We all can land up doing that. It can happen because you get tired. Only, well, quite often say, you know, it just has to be your mum just died, and then the dog pooped right in front of your door and you stepped in it, and you didn't sleep all night because the baby was awake, and you know, and then you woke up and you want to make a cup of coffee and there's no milk. Somebody drank all the milk. You started off your day wrong. You know, all these things happen to you, and then you go into the day, you go to your client and they slap you, and you lose your cool and you react and you slap them back. It happens, you know. Sometimes it's a reaction. The other day, my mum had just died she died on 23rd of August, which is almost 2 months ago now. And my grandbaby don't sleep, and last night again, she wakes up through the night, and I've got hot flashes as well. So it's been a terrible year for us. That's just part of it. There's heaps of other things that's happened. And we were sitting downstairs watching the fish tanks and stuff, and I don't know what I was talking to my husband, and whether she was trying to get my attention on, I don't know why she did it, but she slapped me. And I reacted, I slapped her back. Straight away, I slapped her back. And I actually got a fright at my reaction. And that happens. So we need to be in control of ourselves. And if somebody is neglected and abused, that is a compulsory report. That means we have to report it to the police. It has to be reported within 24 hours to the police. Any vulnerable person being abused has to be reported. Yes, well, report to your supervisor straight away. You know, if you see any signs of abuse, you report it straight away. And never get yourself into a situation where you are overworked in that situation. If you don't feel well, I mean, the rule is anyways today not to go to work sick. And that's perhaps why there's even more so a shortage of staff, because people do fall in sick easily, you know, not more easily, but you know, there's that legal responsibility, because we know we can get a fine if we go to work sick and we make people sick, you know. So, which is good, but it does actually increases that chances of you coming to a place. But don't even go there. You need to know yourself. You need to know when you're getting to the point where you're irritable, or I don't normally know because I get over emotional. So if I'm over emotional and I cry at the drop of a hat, then I know it's time for me to take a break. Take a break. And I know it's hard because quite often we work as on casual positions and we don't have leave, and you know, we don't have sick leave and things like that, and voice. And we, you know, we sort of need our income and we sort of dependent on that, you know, so you just go the extra mile. But at the end of the day, just think about it, because if you land up hurting somebody or hurting yourself, you will be out of completely. So rather take some time off and be short a little bit than being short completely, you know, not like losing your income completely. And it goes onto your blue card. You won't go get a job anywhere else. And so recently, I think that day when I went, when we went just to meet you guys, Sue was talking about the client that was going around accusing care workers of abusing them. And there are some clients out there doing that, and then you land, you know, that lands up on your blue card as well, even though that's maybe the client's behavior. And unless the company knows about that, you know, it's really, really hard, because it's your word against their word, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much the same in childcare. That's why I was, very crossed out going childcare.
It is so hard. Yeah, one of my students was saying she's in the disabled, or not disabled school, special school somewhere, like in Marani or somewhere there, and she was saying a child was accusing her of something the other day. I say this a lot, and I'm going to say it now, and you're going to see it, you're going to hear it a lot. Join the union. Okay, I know the union, you know, politically there's some other things, and I know some of the old school people think, oh, you know, they labor or something. Not necessarily, they are independent. Join the union. I'm also not, I'm not going to advertise my political stance, but you know, I don't support Labour, put it that way. So I'm not a union member because of my political stand. I'm a union member because of my support that I get from the union. If ever you get into trouble, we get insurances from, you know, our companies take out insurances, and if you register yourself, you have to take an indemnity insurance out. And that can protect you if somebody sues you for finances, you know. But your what's it called? Your oh, I just lost the word. Yeah, you know who you are, and you as a person, your integrity, yeah, and that is not that you can't protect with an insurance. You know, somebody wrongfully accused you, you live with that, you know, emotionally as well. So if you're part of the union, you have a bit of protection, because they can actually help you to protect yourself. I had a student actually with Ideal Placements last year, and she had helped a lady. I don't exactly know what happened, but she helped her feet off the couch. and the lady accused her of being rough. And then the company called her in and disciplined her and stuff. And she was so taken back. She just went home and she stayed in her room for two years. She wouldn't come out. She wouldn't go back to work. She just didn't go back to work. She was never found guilty. Never went on to a blue card. But just they asked her to resign. So it really took her back. It really, taken her back emotionally. When she finished the course and she started applying for a job, she one of the people at Ideal Placements that was helps people finding jobs, she called me and she said, "Oh, got the student here. You know what happened to her?" I said, "How dare you even mention that?" She was never found guilty of that. It was never went onto a blue card, and don't even mention that. Just support her. She wants to get back into work and, not holding it over her head for the rest of her life. And she's held herself, she actually got depressed because of that. So if you land up in a situation like that, it's not nice. It's, it really takes it out of you, especially if you're not an abuser and you get accused from abusing someone, it really is a horrible feeling. So, and it really takes it out of you. So that the union helps because the union, you've got a lawyer, that can help you stand up, as well as sealed records, like you're saying in childcare. There's sometimes records are sealed because of confidentiality in a company. A client might be in a certain way, and they might have done that to a few other care workers or a few other teachers' aides, but you're not allowed to see those records because it's their confidentiality. But if you've got the union on your side and the union can come in with you, they have access to those records. They can ask for those records to be revealed. And then when those records come out, it's, oh, this client actually done it to how many other people already? You're not the only one. And then you realize, but I'm not an abuser, it sort of supports you. You know that already, but it's like, it just gives you that confidence that, other people won't think you're not, don't look at you like, you've hurt somebody or, because it's horrible to live in that thing. But if you do see somebody that's abused, please report it. It is actually a compulsory thing to do, a mandatory thing to do, and the company has to report it to the police within 24 hours. So the police will come. The company itself might do a little investigation. They might go and look at the records, and then they'll call the police, and then the police will also be able to access some records. But it's an obligation for us. And through my years in care, I have seen some horrible things. I have seen care workers do that. I worked with an Ian in the 80s in Africa. She was horrible. Every night I used to work night shift, and when I came on duty, people would be out of character and, just really difficult. And people would be bruised, and I knew because of keeping records that this was always, when she was on duty. And so one night I came on duty, and one lady's arm was all black and bruised, and she had broken the lady's arm. So I kept reporting, and nobody listened. And that the next day I said, that's it, I'm going to resign. So I went to look for another job. And as I was walking around giving my resume out, I went into this one business, a bit like Bunnings. I went in the hardware store, and I asked, can I see the manager? And I went to see the manager, and he said, oh, I know you. You work at House Farms. I said, yeah, how do you know? He said, oh, no, I'm one of the board members there. I said, oh. He said, why did you want to resign? So I told him the story. And that night, the board was sitting, and they asked for all the records. And when all the records came out, it really became clear as day that she was an abuser. And she lost her registration, so she was cut from the role. And I've seen that happen. Quite often we are frustrated because we are limited in what we can do, and we report somebody. I've reported people before, and they carry on working, or the company takes their side because they registered, or they more valuable than what you are because they, you know. And then you sort of like, I've been told, don't tell anyone that that happened. And, you know, and you go, really? Then I just go over their heads and I go further and report them, because it's, you know, you do get registered people, nurses, RNs that are abusers. You get care workers that are abusers. Don't, because it can come back to you. So you have to report it. So just a checklist for reporting. You must always immediately report, immediately call your supervisor, tell them this has happened, and then also report it in writing, you know. So complete that compulsory report and say who you reported to. I reported to Supervisor Smith. You know, put their name in the report, because that keeps them honest that they have to do something about it. And then observation. So sometimes if somebody's had a fall and you come in and you know, you've reported it verbally, the supervisors come check, now the person's okay, and you hoist the person up, because you never pick somebody up from the floor unless they can get themselves up. You don't pick them up, or you might have to call the ambulance. The ambulance come and see the person's okay, there's vital signs is okay, everything's okay. They let them lie down. Then you have to go and report observation. So observation is keep going back every 15 minutes, see if they're okay. And then later on, maybe after 2 hours, you go back every half hour. After another 2 hours, you go back every hour. And you check their blood pressure and that type of thing. You keep, you know, watching them for a while after something happened. Check what the organization's requirements are. Some organizations might require you to do blood pressure and stuff every 15 minutes. Others maybe want the EN to do that, or the RN to do that. So that would be different from company to company. Fill in the care plan. So you put in the care plan, and we will talk about what is a care plan quite a bit more through the course. But you might add in there that this has happened. Observe them, same as reporting observation, observe them for a certain time, and sometimes we have to report to the authorities if, you know, if it's been abused. I looked after an old lady in the UK, and she, her husband was sexually abusing her. She was non-verbal. She had dementia, but she became non-verbal, and she did not, she wasn't walking anymore, so we used to lift her up with a stand-up lifter, shower her, get her into the wheelchair, and then she would, you know, sit in the wheelchair until we come and put her back into bed. And quite often when we get her up in the morning, you'd see there was bruising on her private parts, and he had sexually abused. He was a big man. We reported, I don't know what happened to that eventually, but that is just wrong, you know, that's just wrong. And you just have to report it. I mean, in that situation, when it's a husband and wife situation, it does make it a bit harder. Yeah, but still doesn't make it right, you know.
Sure.
We had another lady here that was, her husband abused her as well. And I think somehow somebody managed to put a restriction on when he came and visit. She was also bedfast, non-verbal, and used to come and abuse her. And, you know, after report, I was before my time. I looked after her husband had passed away by the time I started working, but they told me about it. But I think they put something in, like said that somebody has to be present when he comes and visits, you know, not leave her alone with him. So just always report. Identify actual constraints to effective communication and resolve using appropriate communication strategies and techniques. Other barriers, language and logistic barriers, psychological barriers, systematic barriers, and attitudinal barriers. So when you work with somebody with autism, they might have, you know, that They might be like irritated by sounds, or some sensory difficulties, and that might make it hard to communicate with them. So, sort of understanding that type of things is those type of areas. Sorry, am I going too fast? We'll work about it tomorrow. So effective communication is through respect of others and their differences, clearly understanding communication, appropriate forms of communication, attending to the needs of your client, and working for the benefit of your client and his service. Chapter 4 is report problems to your supervisor. So chapter 4.1, comply with legal and ethical responsibilities and discuss difficulties with your supervisor. We talk about what is ethics. Simply stated, ethics refers to the standard of behavior that tells us how human beings ought to act in many situations in which they find themselves as friends or parents or children or citizens, that's possible, business people, teachers, professionals, and so on. So, but it's really difficult to define ethics. I've got a few different definitions here. It's a set of moral principles and standards that we use to guide our practice in a particular profession, or it is not a legal document, but more a voluntary set of controls that regulates our industry. So when you are a doctor, you would make a code. They lay off an oath, like a code of conduct oath. When you're a lawyer, they do an oath as well. When they finish, when they do their graduation, they do this oath, do no harm type thing, protects, whatever the services are they working in. We don't really lay down an oath, but we do fall under, and I've got a copy of that, under the Queensland Health Workers Code of Conduct, which is this, and we will have a unit that we are going to be using this in a lot. So with this Code of Conduct, this is the National Code of Conduct for Healthcare Workers in Queensland, so we fall under this. And it basically just starts off with saying that people have to be registered, and then it talks about things like code of conduct applies to whom it applies to, to apply, provide services in a safe and ethical manner. We have to obtain consent. So just make sure people want to do what we want them to do. Appropriate conduct in relations to treatment advice, which is, when you're a doctor and you tell them that they need to take a certain treatment, or even with us, if you take them to go and shower them, and and you advise them to do something, or don't wet that leg with the dressing on type thing, and they don't listen to your advice, but you still give them that advice, and to take appropriate action in response to adverse events. We'll talk about what is a adverse event still. Infection precautions with infection control, that is a big thing, especially now with COVID, and that will become, we'll be talking about that a lot. When healthcare workers diagnosed with infection or medical condition, where do we stand with that? When we have a certain illness, we have to inform our employers about that. We're not allowed to misinform clients. That's 9. 10 is healthcare workers not to practice under the influence of alcohol or unlawful substance. And that's the same as coming to class. And we also fall under this code of conduct here in class. Healthcare workers with certain mental illness or physical impairment who can't work in the care industry if you've got a mental illness. You know, especially like you've got schizophrenia and you go and the client has a behavior of concern and, you know, you didn't take your medication, you can't. I've had a few of the disability employment services trying to send people here because, yes, there's the disability right that people are allowed to work, but unfortunately, I can't work in this service. You know, you can't care for somebody if you've got that type of constraints. That's different to somebody that maybe with a hearing impairment. But even that is tricky and hard. I've worked with a nurse with a hearing impairment who wears hearing aids in both ears. I mean, she's a night nurse. She talks on the top of her voice, you know, and she's protected by disability rights. But at the same time, she's actually making it really hard for everyone else. And it's not her fault. It's the employer really, and you know, the situation where she's in. So yeah, not to financially exploit your clients. That's happened. We heard, I don't know if you've heard about the care worker a few months ago that took her clients 35,000, I think, on the pokies here in Mackay. Yeah. Yeah, so it's here in Mackay. She took him to the pokies and then she played with his money on the pokies. So exploiting, I mean, because we one-on-one and we, you know, private with clients, yeah, but take advantage of them. Healthcare workers not to engage in sexual misconduct. Healthcare workers to comply with relevant privacy laws. Healthcare workers to keep appropriate records. Healthcare workers to display code of other information. So this is what to do with copy of code of conduct, which is this one, copies of blue card and police clearances and things like that we need to work in the industry. So yeah, that's sort of our code of conduct. And it sort of borders onto the fact that, you know, if you drive down the road and there's a big accident and you're driving past it and you've done your first aid, you'll also have that's not really part of the code of conduct, but a code of ethics to stop and help as much as you can, you know, or you see an old boy walking down the road and you can see he's lost. Hello, please come in.
Hi, I'm Helen.
Hi, Helen.
Hi. I'm a bit late, sorry.
That's all right. We'll go through things. We near the end of our presentation, but that's all good. I will walk through with you. Oh, you had right at home.
Yeah.
That says it all.
Yes, that's right.
That's all right. Oh, shame. Okay, so we are halfway through the unit, but it's okay. I'll catch you up in a little bit. Okay, so yeah, so it's like you know, it's easiest. I want to say what it's not to sort of identify it. So we're just talking about the code of conduct that we fall under. So yeah, it's not necessarily a feeling or religion or law or cultural acceptance, you know. Some people might say it comes within like a cultural background or religion, like, you know, not to do or not for, you know, but it's not. It's you know, it's more practical like that. And in some ways, it's also what your heart is really in caring for people. Like the first little video we saw where it spoke about, you know, having compassion, having that understanding with people.
Wouldn't the ethics be challenged on sensitive backgrounds or
Yes,
ethical?
definitely. Yeah, that's why there's a code of conduct, but then the ethics are slightly different because it changes from person to person, you know. The younger generation might, you know, have a slang that they use that is acceptable that we will find offensive. But then when you go into the workplace and you work with clients, then you have to adjust. You have to then have a professional standard and ethics. And yeah, and sometimes it's a bit hard to teach people that because it's part of your makeup almost, you know. So, and duty of care, which is one of those terminologies we'll be using a lot. So we have a duty of care, and our duty of care towards our clients are to make sure they're comfortable, are to make sure that they're cared for in a proper way, you know, that we care for them in gentleness and kindness and politeness, and, you know, our duty of care is just altogether not to harm, you know, to care for them so they stay under. And it's a good standard of care. So when you go and, you know, clean them up and wash them, and, you know, you take care of what you do in the way you do it. Somebody actually the other day said something really good. They said, when you have a newborn baby and you wipe their bottom, the way you would do that, you know, just if you wipe only one way, you're not rough, you know, sort of, you know, you've got almost like that clinical care involved there as well as, and that's a good way to think of it, like a newborn, like a real vulnerable person. That's in your duty of care. But quite often, duty of care can be in conflict with what our clients want, because our clients can quite often want things that will make them, put them in a position where they refuse to change their pad, or they refuse to go to the toilet, or they refuse to shower. And your duty of care inside of you go, I just want to go and help them, you know. In the olden days, we used to force them into the shower. There would be 2 or 3 of them, and we would march them in there and refuse them. But today, we are much more focused on what the client wants. And they have the right to make decisions that may harm them. You know, it's, and you have to, and that's where duty of care and their right to choose can sometimes be in conflict of each other. So yeah, it can be a little bit of a sticky situation to have this real high code of ethics or high expectation of caring for somebody when they don't have that same expectation for themselves. You know, or as I said, I work with dementia, so quite often you get them wanting to run around. They still want to, they in the emerald stage, so they're just running and running, and, you know, and they topple over, like boom, they fall, and then they hurt themselves, and you go, please, could you just sit down, because you fall every time you stand up, and they just refuse, they just keep wanting to go. And your duty of care to try to keep them sitting, then you go, oh, can I just tie them up? At least they won't break their legs. Yeah, yeah. They got that stubborn streak in them. They just want to go, 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 and, you know, you can't force them to do something against their will. And everything in you are going against trying to protect them, you know. So it can be a conflict situation, and especially with the older carers. You go back with the RNs, ENs, AINs that's been trained in the 80s and the 90s. We were trained in a very legalistic way, you know, in a very, you know, things are just done a certain way. And when you go in there and you tell them, well, at the moment it's all about the client's dignity and choice, then, you know, they don't really understand that. And then you walk yourself into the wall if you say, but I couldn't change them. They refuse for me to change them. And then they think you're a bad carer because you didn't change them, because you didn't force them to change them. But it's what they chose. You can't make them, you can't force them. And besides, if you do force somebody, you will hurt them. You know, especially if they're older people, you give them skin tears if you go grab them, you know, and force them to do something. So that's not duty of care either, is it? You know? So, yeah. So I said adverse event. So I refer to a breach or a non-adherence to standard or procedures or adverse event. And I refer that to the appropriate people. An adverse event poses a threat to the safety of your clients. So that's when somebody has had a fall, or you've given them or they've taken medication. You're not meant to give them medication, but they've taken medication and they've had a reaction to the medication. Or somebody is a diabetic and they go into a coma, a diabetic coma. That is a adverse event. And any of the, or heart attack, adverse event, we would call 000 straight away. That would be our first response. If you work in the, depending on your company, most of the time they would say call 000 first, and then you call your CN or your supervisor. And these things would be, like I said, falls or incidents or behaviors of concern. Somebody is really aggressive and they start lashing out and, and wanting to hurt somebody else or hurt themselves, you call 000. So the appropriate people would be call 000, call your supervisor, or like at Good Shepherd Lodge, we would always call the RN and the EN. They would call 000 if it's necessary. So it just depends on the organization, whatever they, however their structure is. So it could also be breaches in duty of care. So sometimes, like I said, sometimes you work with the RN or EN or another care worker that have actually breached their duty of care, that have, done something wrong. They've not, I've had and worked with an RN at Good Shepherd Lodge. We had a lady that had a fall. It was 8 o'clock in the evening when we picked up, and she was in the 90s, 96, and she was always crying for help, always. And so people started saying, oh, she's crying wolf. But could you imagine? I mean, I'm only 50 and I'm my knee, one dodgy knee now. And I'm walking and it's really sore. Some nights it keeps me awake all night. And I'm only 50. How do you feel when you're 80 and 100? That with that pain and, and they live with that. And they used to say, oh, she just cries wolf. But she had a fall and she was crying. Oh, she's so sore. And they said, oh, but she always cries like that. But this was different. She really was not well. And I kept calling the RN. I said, please, could you come and see to it? Please, could you call the ambulance? No, he came in and he just did that. He did not even follow the right procedures in, checking her after she's had the fall. And but he's my RN, so I'm under him, that ladder that you have to climb. And so I didn't know what to do. I called the EN and he was also overriding her. So the next morning I went to the office and I reported him. And at that stage, our CN was away. Her dad had just passed away, so she was not there. And we had just the general manager in the office. So I went and I reported it to her. And she took the report, and then the next day she called me and she said to me, he's done everything right. But what he had done is he had gone to the paperwork and reported that as if he had done everything right. She said, he has done everything right, and you don't ever talk about it again. You don't tell anyone about it. I said, yeah, right. Okay. Anyway, so when our CN came back, I went to see her and I told her about it. And she'd actually pulled some records, and that was not the only time he breached duty of care. He breached duty of care other times as well. And I pulled all these records, and he was also, he also lost his registration. He was working in Sydney somewhere now as a keeper or something else. He had changed careers. But he was not a nice man, and he was always bullying us nurses as well, because he was like the big man around, when he was around. Yeah, but he was not doing the right thing. He never did, because when somebody's had a fall, they've got to do what do they call it? Neuro-ops, and the neuro-ops, you have to check the pupils dilating, and you also check whether they've got the same strength in their hands and in their feet, and he didn't do that. And when they've had a fall like she had, they would check whether she's had a hip broken or not. They checked he never checked the length of her legs. He never checked the strength in her legs or anything like that. Anyway, what happened with her, she died a week later. She went that, because he didn't send her to hospital. When that stuff came on, they sent her to hospital at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because she kept crying like that. And then a week later, she died because of that, you know, the injuries that she actually broke her hip and they did not do anything about it. She fell at 8 o'clock. They only sent her to hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, all that time in between. So these things happen. These type of events should always be reported to the appropriate personnel. And yes, like I said, sometimes you report it and they don't listen, you know, nothing happens, which usually will be a designated manager or a team or work health and safety officer or the authorities if necessary. So unusual event or incident is a mandatory report, which means the worker has a legal responsibility, as I said earlier, to report abuse. For example, if you go and Google mandatory report, it will come up with child abuse. It's under the child abuse clause, but it's also for disabled people and elderly people, really. It's the same in our industry. And remember, a mandatory report means that you must report the suspected abuse. You do not have a choice. You have to report it. And when you've reported it, you've done your you have reached your responsibility. If you have found that you have, you know, had issues with the person you reported to and they didn't do anything about it, you can pursue it in a, you know, going to the next level or going to the police if you want. But you have actually done your responsibility by reporting it to your supervisor. Unless, of course, the abuser is your supervisor. That's, yeah. And sometimes, like the event that I had in Africa with that Ian, when I reported her to in those days, we still had what is the matrons? We had a matron, and I reported her to the matron, and she didn't do anything about it because, and it's the same year at the moment, because we don't have very many RNs and ENs at the moment, and especially with our borders closed, we used to get a lot of Filipino RNs coming in from the Philippines, and then they would do their hi Chloe. Hi Chloe. Can you hear me? Oh, she dropped out again. So they used to yeah, and go down south, I think in actually Melbourne, where the nursing school is, and then they do a 3-month course to be registered in Australia. So with all of this, our borders closing even nationally, that's made an effect on how many RNs and ENs we have at the moment. A lot of them come into Australia, and that's what's happened. A lot of them come and then they have a 2-year temporary visa, and then companies lock them in on that 2-year temporary visa, and they actually abuse them. They really do. They misuse them, and I've got a lot of RN friends that work at Good Shepherd Lodge that get thrown 90 hours a fortnight, if not more, and you know, and they're terribly underpaid because they're on these temporary visas. And so the minute these visas end, they off. They become citizens or permanent residents, and they're not under this visas anymore. They off. They're either going to the base or they go to private sector, and we lose them in aged care and disability care. So and that's why at the moment you girls are doing medication. You're not meant to be doing medication. It's actually illegal, and you can get into such big trouble with that. So and that's happening everywhere. I've had another man the other day. He's from he's also got his own care company. He came in and I asked him that question about medication. And he said, "Oh yeah, we train them. We give them a buddy shift." And I think, "Oh yeah, that's training, a buddy shift and how to do medication." It's not right, you know. So at the moment it is a real sticky situation, but it's not just one or two companies. It's like everyone is doing it. So really, you will walk into that situation no matter where you go. You're going to land up in that same situation. But referring issues that impact on the achievement of employees and employers and the client's rights and responsibilities. Even under the new HK standards, and we will talk about the standards a bit later on as well, they have responsibilities towards us, but they also have rights, obviously, but we always hear about the rights, but we never hear about the responsibilities. But they do have the right to dignity and choice. That is really what everything pivots around. You know, that's in the center of it. If you take the rights and responsibilities away, that cockwheel will fall apart, because it's the basis of it. You know, everything else hang on it. So if you take their dignity and choice away, and their rights and choices away, then you fail all the other standards. What does it mean if you fail the standards? It means that the government can actually close the company. Okay, so that is really the bottom line for any of the services we are partaking in, is they respect their dignity and choice. It is their right to choose. It's their right to be involved. It's their right to be informed. It's their right to any services. That is the basis. If they don't have those rights, then a company can fail. But a client would also have responsibility to us to give us the correct information about who they are, obviously. You know, what their care needs are. If they've got any medical issues, they're meant to give us that information. Keep the contact details up to date and respect others' rights. They have to respect others' rights as well. Honor agreements, they also need to respect confidentiality and provide us with a safe environment to work in. So, you know, if their home is not safe, then it's really hard. Sometimes in here in Mackay, some of the older folk, they don't put the aircons on, and the house is moldy, and it's really hard when you walk in there. It's kind of. I worked with a lady in Slate Point. She was in her own home, and she had so much clutter, and she had birds. And the snakes came up because the bird seeds would be on the floor, and the rats came, and the house was so cluttered. It's unreal, you know. And she had, it wasn't safe, and she would expect me, and none of the services wanted her anymore. She's also on NDIS, because she makes the girls do things like climb up ladders and, you know, clean out the aircon filters, and it's a 3-story home, but the top story, or actually it's the level you're coming from the street, but because it's in Slate Point on the hill there, it's the top floor. It's like a double story on its own, because it's got the roof open up. So the aircon is right far up. You almost have to climb up a tall ladder to get to the aircon filter. Yeah, and and she expected me to do that. I had to do strange things for her, but you know, it's really, really hard. In her bird flew away, and then she fired me. I've never been so happy to be fired in my life. Everybody expected me to just keep going, you know. Yeah, sometimes really hard. Refer unresolved conflict situations to your supervisor, chapter 4.4. So yeah, I think that's straightforward. If there's any conflict, yeah, always your supervisor, as I said, as an AIN or assistant in nursing or care worker, our first responsibility is towards our supervisor. We are really there in service of them, and then secondary in service of our clients. And I know we all think our clients is first, but the problem is with our scope of practice, we have to stand so close to, so I'm just going to answer. It's one of our other students. Our supervisors are really the people that makes the decisions, you know, all round. for our clients. So we really have to work very closely with them. You know, your CN is the most important person. So just keep reporting to them. Make them sick with the reports, but you know, that's what they're there for, because they have to resolve the conflict. They've got the training to do that. We don't. You know, that's why we depend on them. Chapter 5.1, completing documentation to legal and requirements and organization policies and procedures. So there's different documentation. Every company has their own documents. What do you call it? Case notes? Progress notes? Case notes? We call it progress notes. I think Ideal Placements calls it case notes as well. Then you could get, you might have ACFI, which is an aged care. We have ACFI with the, I don't know what the disability care workers do. I don't know what they call it, but they do, it's a kind of like a, ACFI is your care funding instrument. So when we do ACFI, we record everything. We record how many times they go to the toilet, how, you know, every hour they awake, we record every hour, you know, sleeping awake or bowels open, what kind of care we gave them, you know, how much assistance did they need for their care. So that helps with the funding, and if all that recording goes in there, and then the care plan gets drawn up from that recording. And that is in disability care, it goes to NDIS, and then the NDIS decides how much money that client has, and that also determines, like in aged care, whether there's 2 or 3 people, or 2 people or 1 person. Never 3. We're lucky if there's to assist, they're able to pay for 2 people to look after that person, or only 1 person can go there. If a person is bed fast and they have to be lifted up with the lifter, and they, you know, need constant changing and everything, they have enough funding to provide services for, you know, 2 care workers. And disability support, yeah, if there's behaviors of concern, those are very important to record, because those are the money spinners. Any behaviors, if you write those down, and that would be like a behavior record, it probably go on your case notes as well. Your care plans, which is in documents, made up some care plans. So if you work, some companies have it all on like digital. I just made a care plan here, and we will do these type of care plans together sometime, which just says on top, if there's any, I've got a few, I'm going to send them around if you want to just have a little look or something into it. But, it just says their care needs, or care alerts. It just tells you who they are, what kind of assistance do they need on the front, and, you know, whether they need glasses or hearing aids, whether what language they speak. And the most important for aged care workers always to know if somebody's mobile or not. Do they need a wheelie walker or a full hoist or whatever, because you don't want to go and lift somebody up from bed and let them stand up and then they go down to the floor like a sack of potatoes. You know, I've had that. Where a care worker, new person started, and she went into an old boy's room, and he had a rollator, which is one of those high, really walker type things. And he had one of those in his room, and she assumed that he can walk with the rollator, but he couldn't. He was actually a stand-up lifter, and she stood him up, and he just went down, you know. And this rollator has got like steel pipes on it, and he had skin tears all the way down his legs, and he was just lying down on the floor in a puddle of blood. She felt so bad. But she never looked at the care plan before she went into his house, care for him. So before you go and care for anyone, you have to go and look at their care plan. Now, we don't ever really get to draw up a care plan. Most of the time, this is drawn up by the RN or the EN or the CN that goes around the home drawing it up. We will contribute to it by saying this person's mobility has now declined. and you phone your care worker and your supervisor and say, oh, she probably needs some more assistance now, and then they will adjust the care plan. But we don't generally sort of draw up care plans. We will do one together anyways through the course of this course, but yeah, we just need to know how to interpret whatever information is in here, you know, and everything is in here from behaviors. Read it, yeah. Yeah, and this will change from time to time. You know, if you work with disability, the focus is slightly different. Your focus would be to try to improve their skills and get them, you know, doing their goals would be said, and you try to get them to do more in things independently. Where in aged care, we are expectant that people will decline. You know, we know that, you know, they're going backwards, not forwards. So we expect them to actually have more needs as it goes. Where with disability, we expect their needs to be coming, you know, more independent, really. So that's all in the care plans. Then you have incident reports. So incident reports is if they've had a fall or, you know, they've hurt themselves, they've got a skin tear, or, you know, bruise somewhere, that would be an incident report. Hazard reports would be, that's a physical report of like, oh, there's a you know, puddle or a mat or a loose carpet or, you know, rail loose or door that doesn't lock or something like that, or light or electricity. So that's a physical thing. That's in some places you have to, if you're in the in home care, you might call a maintenance guy yourself. Otherwise, it will go through the company and they'll send their maintenance person out. Phone messages, transfer forms if you're in an aged care facility. So I've got just a little video on writing, basics of writing reports. It's going to play. There we go.
Hi, my name is David Keegan. I'm an academic family doctor here at the University of Calgary. Today we're talking about how to write clinical patient notes, the basics. So first of all, why write a note in the first place? Why are we writing notes when we see a patient? And it's really important to think about these purposes because that's going to help us understand why we do things the way we do when we write them down. So one of the main reasons we write notes is so that we can actually document for ourselves what we did with the patient, what we discussed, and so on, so that later on we can go back and look at those notes and see what we did and what we heard from the patient. Great. They're also there to help other people do the same thing. One of our colleagues or another health professional or somebody else might have to be taking out the care of that patient, and they need to be able to see what we did as well. And there's also a documentation reason to do it for good medical, legal, quality reasons, so that we're tracking what we're doing, so that if there's any questions later on, then the answers are there, what we actually discussed, what we came up with, so that there's actually like a source of truth around the thing. So there's a variety of reasons. And if you're a clinical learner, and you probably are if you're watching this video, there's another reason to do it, is so that you can display that you can think about a patient in a clear way, so that you can work with a patient, talk to a patient, examine the patient, and document things in a way that shows you the clarity of thought and understanding about the patient and their history. So with all that said, how do you actually write a patient note? Well, there's a few things you got to do. First, you've got to think about, is this the right patient record I'm looking at? So if you've seen a John Smith, are you looking at John Smith's paper chart, or are you looking at John Smith's electronic chart? And it's amazing that in the era of electronics, how easy it is to be finding yourself in a different patient's clinical record, and you're happily typing away an obstetrical history on a 92-year-old man, and you just made a mistake. So be careful about that. And the very first thing you should do is check. Check to make sure you've got the right patient. Wow. So that's going to save you a ton of time, because if you ever do this incorrectly, it's a real hassle to fix all that. Next, if you're in a standard clinic, maybe it's a family medicine clinic or a gastrointestinal GI clinic, and that clinic knows that they're the only things working there, you might not need a title. But if you're in the hospital or in a multidisciplinary outpatient setting where you share files and so on, you might actually have to put it as a title or a heading. So the heading would demonstrate or reveal who are you working with, what kind of service or what kind of group are you with. So it might be something like, heading might be surgery progress note or something like that. And in that way, it's really clear to everybody what your note is all about. Now, some other things to help with the quality and safety aspects are making sure you've got the date and time correct. You've got the date. The time may not be necessary, but it often is, particularly in inpatient or particularly in emergency or ICU settings. The time is also very important. And you want to make sure as well that your name, who you are, is clearly identified. So your name is going to have to be there at the bottom. Typically, we're going to sign and print your name and put your pager if you have one, and your designation. So if you're a second-year medical student, find out what your designation at your local school might be. But it could be something like, Med 2 or something like that, so that everybody knows what this note is about, when it was written and conducted, and then who wrote it. Was it a medical student, was it a staff surgeon, or somebody in between? So if you have all these things down, this is going to help with the safety of the note itself, make sure that's a strong, clear note. And then the content of the note is something different. What goes on the insides are there's 4 key categories for any note, and you'll see them come up over and over again. And they fall on a mnemonic called SOAP. S-O-A-P. S is for subjective. So in all notes, you're going to be describing to some degree the story as you understand it. Often it's told by the patient or the patient's family themselves. And where possible, use their words. So if somebody said, I'm short of breath, don't write down, patient had dyspnea for 4 days. No, you don't say dyspnea, you actually say, patient describes being short of breath. Times 5 days. By using the patient's words, it helps capture things better within a more nuanced way. And sometimes we might interpret a patient's word to mean a fancy medical word, but maybe you got that wrong. So you almost never go wrong by quoting the patient's direct words. So in the subjective, you're going to be finding out from the patient and documenting from the patient stuff that relates to the story, why they're here today, or what's the issue now that they're picking up from. Next is your objective. Stuff and objective is what's objective, what you are seeing or finding out through objective. So it's a combination of usually your glance. You might glance at a patient and see how they're doing. So if it's somebody in the emergency room who's here with asthma, you might have glanced at them across the corridor. If they're sitting up playing their mobile device, then you might write, 5-year-old child sitting up playing their mobile device. Or maybe they're reading a book or whatever. Or maybe they're quite ill and they're gasping for breath and leaning forward and looking quite scared. You might say distressed looking child, leaning forward, struggling to breathe. So those 2 descriptor blank sentences are very different. You'll also put an objective, things that you find. This is where your examination will go. And so the things that you find when you assess the patient, or you're looking at the bedside, you're looking at their heart rate, or you're checking their heart rate, listening to their lungs, all those sorts of things go under here. They're objective things that you are finding out. You're not relying on somebody's story, no, stuff you're finding out. And then there's other objective things that will typically flow here as well. Labs or reports or whatever. You might have some other objective findings from tests will go there as well. The A stands for assessment. Assessment is what you think is going on, which is typically a diagnosis, but sometimes it's a differential diagnosis. And sometimes it might be an assessment of somebody's stability, like they're a long-term chronic type 2 diabetic. Your assessment might be stable diabetes control or unstable diabetes control, needs more tighter control. To because everyone knows the patient's diabetic. There's no surprise about that. But the assessment today is their level of stability. So assessment can be a diagnosis or a differential diagnosis. If you have no understanding and you can't figure out what it might be, it could be like hypertension NYD. You don't know why yet, and that's okay. Not NYD stands for not yet diagnosed. And if you think of a certain diagnosis, like let's say you think it's hepatitis, go down query hepatitis, because you're not sure yet. You think it might be. And so there's different ways to make your assessment that is sort of varied by the patient. But it's basically your judgment of what's going on. And finally, P stands for plan. So this is what's happening now as a result of you seeing the patient or you being involved in the patient's care. So it could be things like things that the patient's going to do. So the patient might, you might be talking to the patient and they're going to be increasing their high intensity interval training part of their exercise, going from 2 days a week to 5 days a week. You might do something like that. There might be some investigations you're going to do. So investigations might particularly help out with some areas of confusion that we already talked about under assessment. If you are going to give any therapies, they would go here. And therapies could be medicines or otherwise. Maybe you're giving them oxygen. Maybe you're going to be giving a medication. And then if you're doing any consultations. So if you're going to be getting the patient engaged with anybody else. So like a dietitian, surgeon, or whoever. So the content of the note is subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. And these are the main features of every single clinical note you're ever going to write. And we trace, in order to make sure it's a good note that is actually worthwhile, that hits all the issues of safety and quality and so on. Check to make sure it's the correct patient that you're writing a note on. Make sure you've got some sort of heading if you're in a multidisciplinary or a hospital-based environment, so people know who is writing this note and what it's for. Make sure you have the date and time entered. If it's electronic, that will probably come automatically. But if you're on a paper record, make sure you record that. And finally, make sure it's very clear who you are. So you print your name, you sign your name, and then you have some sort of designation so people know who you are, whether it's a PGY 3, a med student, or whomever. So that's how to write patient notes, the basics. Thanks very much.
That's very clinical, but the same will apply for us. We will write, if you, with HK, we write AIN as assistant in nursing, and you would just put care worker, CW, behind your name, and then sign it. But the basis stays the same, sort of that structure on it, just to make sure the information is there. We also always say that it has to be factual and concise and accurate. And yeah, every organization, some organizations do it electronically, others have paper. Quite often in home care, it is paper. And the other thing that is quite useful, and I tell a lot of my students that, is to use your phone, to make notes as the day goes. Just open your notes. This is Apple, but you have that on the Android as well, on Samsung as well. So and I've got a client note up there. So when I can just through the day, if you click your keyboard, you can actually record. So you can record something while you're talking, and it's recording now as I'm talking. Can you see? Oh, yeah. So while it's recording, and it just records it, and you can just say, got client up at 6 a.m. We had a quick shower. Client seems warm to touch. Called the RN. Full stop. And then you go out of your note, and then later on when you go and write the notes down, because it's not always possible to do all the recording straight away. So yeah, before I got a little baggie. I think it's at home at the moment. A little nursing bagging that with a little notebook in. But these days we all carry our phones, and quite often the company's case notes is also accessible through through your phone. And then you can actually, once you've recorded it, she's still recording. You can actually go see how it goes. Once you've recorded it, get in touch with the RN, So I can go, if I just click on there, I can go select the whole note, copy it from there and go and paste it into my client's notes. So it just makes it easier. But yeah, you all have notes on your phone. So these days on our smartphones, we have the notes and you can keep the notes in there, even if you're going to physically go and write it from there or type it in. Like while the client's on the toilet sitting and you're waiting for the client, type a few notes into your phone and then you have the notes ready to put into a records a bit later. But be factual and concise and accurate, It's not our opinion. He had their subjective and he said what the client said, not what we thought. So when you come in there and the client's lying on the floor, you can't go, I think she's slipped over her slippers, or, you just say, client found on the floor, her shoes is lying next to her, she's lying in this position. You just describe exactly what you see, not what you think happened, just what you saw. And if the client tells you, I fell over my slippers, you can put that in inverted commas, client said she slipped over her slippers. Then we know, oh, there might be something wrong, the slippers might be too loose or something might be wrong with that. Non-judgmental objective notes. At the end of the day, make sure that it's all confidential and it's stored away, that it's locked in, or you'll have you'll log in your name and a code to get into the notes. And above your notes is your care plan, is it? Above each client's notes is normally a care plan, so you can sort of access it like that. On your portal, yeah. Yeah. And the good thing about it is that, you can go back and see what the previous care workers have done for that client. So if you haven't been there for a few days, then you can also see, what they've done, because there would be some notes on that client that you'd be able to see. And there'd be probably a place for staff messages or something like that. Just keep that separate from your client's notes. Remember, your client's notes is a legal document, but staff messages, we can tell things to each other. And it's not appropriate to say, oh, the previous staff member did not make the client's bed on the client's notes. That goes, and that perhaps you can say it in the staff messages or speak to the previous staff member in person. You were not there. Something could have gone wrong. The client might have had a fall and the staff member was off her head, running off her head and not able to get to do the dishes and the washing and everything else. And you come on duty and everything's out of order. You can't put it just straight on the notes or onto the messages. Rather talk to her. Were you okay yesterday? Was there something wrong with your shift? Did you have a hard time? And she'll tell you. Most of the time, we tell each other at handover and say, oh, we had a terrible morning. I'm so sorry. We didn't get around to doing all of this and that, And we're there to fill in for each other. Remember, quite often it's 24-hour care. So we're there to fill in for that, We work together. It's not just one person's responsibility. We are working together. So just in documentation, important to keep that in mind. So read the documents related to clarify understanding, our scope of practice again, and our responsibilities. That will keep popping up, our scope of practice. That will keep popping up. Scope of practice, as I said, it's our responsibility. We can assist with self-medication, and that's sort of how they get it away with it at the moment in the, in the home and community care, that, they write it down as self-medication, but the client's not always self-medicating. If they're able to take the Webster pack and peel the medication out themselves, and you can just pass them a glass of water, that's self-medication. But if you take the Webster pack and peel the medicine out, that's not self-medication. Anyways, but Yeah, please be so careful about that. I think you need to draw the line when it goes with any scheduled drugs. You don't administer scheduled drugs anyway. So, yeah, so that's where the yeah, no, Cass has been looking at that, and she's been with me already and saying, asking about that. I can't do it. It has to be a RN that does it. So I know Morrissey Training does it. So I don't know where you're gonna go, Morrissey Training. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit expensive though, that this is it for, and it is, yeah, it's a, like, I think it might be able to do it over a week or so, but there's some modules part of it that Cass can sign off anyways, which is fine. But yeah, even when you've done endorsed medication course, your scheduled drugs still need to be done by a RN. So then our responsibilities obviously is personal care. You know, we are bum washers, whether we like it or not. And if anyone tells you otherwise, there is occasionally the position where you might just be a company, you know, where you can just go in and, yeah, just companion and just take them out for a cup of tea or something like that. But in general, even with disability care, you go to Canelands for an outing or something, and somebody soils themselves, guess what? You're going to have to clean them up, you know? So, you know, that's part of our care. Daily living activities, that is part of our care, especially out in the community. Not so much if you're at Good Shepherd Lodge, there's other people that does the washing up and the cleaning and stuff. We just do the clinical care. But in home and community care, it's part of your job to help them with daily living activities. And it is a holistic care. You know, we do care for them emotionally and spiritually. We do sit down with them when they're sad. And they do cry on our shoulders, you know, and they share their burdens with us. And that's part of the care. I had an older lady that was doing my course with me. She worked out in Serena. And brilliant, the company she works for, Blue River Care, I think they're called. They're really, really good. And they put her with an old lady that she just has to take her to the bank once a week and sit with her and have a cup of tea with her. And she called me, she said to me, I'm so frustrated. I'm not doing anything. I'm just going out to this woman and I'm having a cup of tea with her. And I said to her, but you need to realize that you're probably the only person she sees, you know, and she is probably starving for a bit of company, you know, so you are doing a great job. You know, that's a job you're doing. It's holistic care, you know. She might be able to still shower herself and get on and all that, but you are actually doing, you know, that's part of our job to, yeah, it's part of our job to give her that emotional and like social support, you know, it's part of our job. Sometimes assisting with meal preparation and assisting with household tasks, which is classed as your daily living activities. And again, all the records, progress notes, hazard reports, assessments, emails, letters to the clients, letters to external service providers, emails to co-workers and managers. Organization now have policies and procedures about engaging in social media, especially because, you know, of the age we're living in. Social media is a big thing, you know. We can't share on Facebook, oh, I just had a literally shitty day at work, you know. You can't share that. You can't share your client's information on Facebook, you know. That's just giggle these people that shares what they eat and where they go, and so we can't do that, you know. We just can't. We just it's against our code of conduct. There's a policy on here as well about that. So all employees are responsible for being aware of the policies and understanding their responsibilities around social media and their professional and personal capacity, you know. No, you can't. And you can't share where you live on Facebook either. Don't put your address on there. Because you have clients, might have a young disabled client that has got a mental disability or something like that, and they spot your address on there and they come and stalk you, and you've got big trouble. Last year at Ideal Placements, there was a lady up, I think, Cannonvale or somewhere there, and she was a care worker, and she had a couple that was with mental disabilities, and the couple had split up, and she had the couple, and the other person knew that she was in touch still with the partner or the ex-partner, and he stalked her, and when she stopped somewhere, he got hold of her documentation because the partner was in the safety in the safe house, and he got hold of the partner's details, and he went and kidnapped his ex-partner, and put her in the boot of the car. So it was a big thing, with keeping records safe. Going, even if you stop at the shop and hop out, and you might have the client's records on your passenger seat. Even with your handbag, having that on your passenger seat, just lock it in your boot or something. Be a bit more vigilant about it, because you've got the client's information in there. You might have forget to lock the door or something. We should be aware of the Privacy Act 1988 when using social media and not disclose our client's information online. Also, especially last year with the Aged Care Commission, that was a big story. People like 7 years would go around trying to find out what happens at the place where you work. Is there any abuse there or things like that? We've had a client that lost her rings, and her daughter said, "Oh, we stole the rings," and then said she went to report us. She went to the media, and then the media is trying to get interviews with us of what happens. So we're not allowed to talk to the media either. That's part of it. And besides, they pull things out of perspective anyways. So yeah. I mean, I always think about it. When I first saw Racing Stripes, I thought if they can get a donkey to talk, then what can they do with you in your face? Get you to say anything, or it's really like so digital media, the internet. Remember, everything you write on the internet stays there forever. It stays there. Email, social media, podcasts, videos. I'm broadcasting this on YouTube, so it's on YouTube. So sometimes if there's information, private information, that I always try to scramble up things that have happened, because I have the advantage of being working for 30 years, and some things happened here, some things happened in the UK, some things happened in Namibia, and sometimes if it's sensitive or the person's still alive, I scramble it up and I put that person in a different location, or change the details so you don't know who I'm talking about. But sometimes it can be, you can talk about a client, and then the client's family sits next to you in a restaurant, and then they hear you, "Oh, that's Mama, that sounds like my mother you're talking about." That's happened in Northern Beaches. Some girls were sitting there at the bowls club, and they were talking about a client, and the client's granddaughter overheard them, and they went to drop them in. So those care workers lost their jobs because they were talking about the clients in public. So be clear and accurate and objective when writing your documents, as we said. Something you might use is who, where, when, what, why, how, and I've got another who there. If it's a behavior, then you always say who did what to who. So you might, add the other clients if they've been aggressive towards each other. You might add that in also, because how it affected that other person will also be important to note that down. So be very objective. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 W's and 1 H. Concise. We say, did you guys want a little break? Are you going? Little break yet? Go. We'll have a 5-minute break. So stretch of legs. It's quite overwhelming. We're almost done now. Okay, so that's my phone number, yes. All right. So just with being concise, just using uh, an active voice instead of a passive voice. I really struggle with this still. Because I just don't seem to be able to. I think it's my language as well with translating things from Afrikaans, but yeah, you use an active voice, yeah, instead. So it's more about the subject, sort of being the focus of the sentence. So who was the subject in the matter? I think that's what the description goes first. I still struggle with this. Nevertheless, it's just important to make notes. If you struggle with, how to write notes, as long as you write notes, that's the most important. Obviously, if you can write better notes, then, I suppose, again, it's about working smarter, not harder, like writing less or writing, more direct.
My argument is she doesn't want a novel, she just wants
Just the facts. Yeah.
sometimes we've got to extend it to explain on that.
Yeah, sometimes it's really hard, but it's very important to make a note of everything, but more, staying to the point. That's what's more, more important. I have another little video on writing an informal report.
Hi, my name's Tara, and I'm just going to take you through some ideas for an information report. So we'll just go ahead and do that. So first of all, we need to think about the purpose of an information report. What do you use it for? And clearly this includes in the title itself. So it's information and it's report about an event or something that's happened to you, or that is happening to you, or maybe somebody else, or in a community or a country, etc. It's really important in the information report that you will be gathering facts. So do a little bit of research and make sure that your facts are accurate. Now, if you feel that something doesn't seem right, then you're probably right. You need to go and find out the truth and only use those that are safe to you. So they need to be true, not check them. So get more information. So we're going to create a little bit of a plan. Here's some things that you can include in your writing. And this one is a title. So your title is really important to get it right, actually, because it's the first thing that your reader is going to look at. And it leads into the whole body of your writing. And then you write an introduction that takes up the title, the idea of the title, and puts the reader, makes them want to read, into the body. And there are subtopics that all support your title and your introduction and help the reader get a clear understanding. And then we conclude the whole writing with a conclusion. Now, the conclusion ties up the title, the introduction, and the subtopic, and just reiterates the important parts of what you've been sharing in this information report. So, and also another important thing is to write your information in the order that it happened. It makes it easy for the reader to follow, and it just makes sense. So that's in chronological order. Here's some things that you need to think about. Who are you writing this for? You've got to consider whether it's for a younger audience or an older audience or in between. So clearly your writing will be, you'll be writing words and ways of writing that is good for that audience. What can you teach your reader, and is it interesting? You've got to make sure that you keep your notes organized and try to hook the reader, keep them interested, keep them engaged. And you could add a surprising fact or a really interesting fact about your topic and say, oh, I want to learn about that. You need to get their attention. So just going to have a quick look at some common errors in an information report and not using relevant information. We actually talked about that earlier on. Make sure your information is correct and that don't lose credibility from your readers. They can smell a red if they see one. Words are too technical. Clearly, if it's for a younger audience, you need to think about that. For an older audience, it wouldn't be so bad. And again, we say facts are untrue. So we don't want untrue facts in your information report, or perhaps they're not in the right order. So anyway, there's some ideas. I hope you find that helpful, and good luck. Thank you.
Okay, contributing to continuous improvement. Identifying and voicing improvements in your workplace. It's always good to be involved in continuous improvement. We will also be involved in, changing our clients' care plans as, like, you see that something can be done differently for your clients, you will find your supervisor and let them know, and they will change it. And that's really also continuous improvement. Continually improving things. We always try to do things better. If it's easier, like you have a client and you see, just the way the client walks, perhaps it might be better to get the client to walk with a different walking method. If they're struggling with a walking stick, you see, well, they not walking properly, you might suggest that get a walking stick with those little feet on, or get a wheelie walker. Suggest something else for the client that might work better, or something in the house that might be improved, or anything that you can really think about, just making suggestions. We had like little things, made a little clock that we laminated and put up at his bed, so we in their room. So if somebody's bed passed, we move the clock every 2 hours or 4 hours. We seen to that time, so anyone that comes into the room will know what time that client is seen to last. So that was something small we did as AINs at Good Shepherd Lodge, and that made it a little bit easier. And then it became part of the, they put it in the suggestions, and then it was, added to sort of part of our client care. Yeah. So talking about the issues and listening and raising concerns, understanding our role, the scope of practice again, understanding the company's policies and procedures, seeking information and sharing views, discussing issues in a timely manner. So as soon as they happen, you talk about it, consider what's been said before the decisions are made, and attending scheduled meetings. Always important to go to meetings, because that's the one place where you can actually raise concerns and talk about things that could be improved. Outcomes for the client, enhancing sustainability for our work, and safety. It's a safety issue with the client in the way they act, or the way we do care for them, or you have to raise those and make it better, try and make it better. And usually it goes around, the policies and procedures in a company is normally like a thick file that sits in the office, and it's about this thick. It's got all sorts of different issues in it. We will talk about policies and procedures right through this course, because every company has different ways they approach that. But within that would be a continuous improvement section on how they deal with that. And normally it's something like this, and it will normally look like something like this. So they identify the HK standards, or the quality standards that the government puts out. Then they collect data on their practice, the way they do it. They compare that with the standards and see if that is going to, be covering all the standards. And if it's not, then they plan some changes. Then they implement the changes. And then there's a reorder to see, do we still have to do that again? So it goes around and around, and constantly there's improvement happening. And it's part of the HK standards and the disability standards they're working on at the moment, updating it, and hopefully it will be done by the end of the year. It was going to be done by the 1st of July, but they have postponed it, which is the same in disability care, that it it's going to become a compulsory thing to have a Z3. In aged care, it is already a compulsory thing. So that's part of the standards and complying with the standards. And as I said earlier, a company that does not comply with the standards, if a watchdog, a government organization come around to check them for audit, and they don't comply to 2 of those standards, they can close the company down. So normally what they will do is give the company a second chance and say, oh, you should really improve this and you should really improve that, and then give the company 3 months or something like that to improve that, and then they'll come back and re-audit them. And as I said, that pivots around dignity and choice. And as dignity and choice sits in the middle, you automatically fail 2 standards if any of the others are failed. So it's not hard to fail it, you know. The companies has to be really on the ball with the keeping up, you know, the standards. There was some of the Bupa care homes that was closed down south last year because of them failing the standards. In Mackay, the care home, Glenella Care, they've had the government watchdog on their case a few years ago. Yeah, they failed because it was with hygiene, you know, infection control. Some of the residents passed away, and then there was a big audit on them because of the way they deal with, you know, with infection control. So it's, you know, it's happened, you know, on our doorstep, and it can happen at any company we work with, and then we out of work. So it will affect us as well, you know. So we have to be up to scratch with that. Infection control, client services, work health and safety things, work culture. That's really important. In our, you know, we're a bunch of women together, and we can be a bunch of bitches. We really can. And sometimes we work with a bunch of bitches, and that's a workplace culture. And if people are bullied and there's issues at work, you know, it affects the way we work. It affects the way we feel about our work. And if we, you know, come into a new company and you get shot down or you're treated badly, or, you know, you're bullied, you lose, you know, your zest for really being there, or, you know, really bringing your best. So it really affects us all together, and, you know, we should really, yeah, be aware of that. I know, I mean, some of the big companies in Mackay that I've heard that one of my students went to a big company and she was bullied there. She complained about it, and the company did nothing about it. They said to her, go back to the same home where the supervisor and the other care workers were, you know, acting inappropriately. They were bossy, and they were treating the client very familiar with the client. Oh, they've known the client for so long, and all that. And she was just not happy with the way they were dealing. They were not professional, she felt. And she's, you know, I think she's an amazing person. She came back to me, and I said to her, look, well, she was really, really unhappy, and really, because they also, after she complained, they were bullying her more because she complained. And yeah, and I helped her to find another placement, and she's really happy where she is. And the person that runs this company, he's got an anti-bullying policy that's so strict. If anyone does that, they're out the door. He even joking with each other, you know, and doing a dirty joke, so he doesn't tolerate that either. So it's about time we pull our socks up with that, because I've had a friend of mine working in a place, and she was like being bullied, and she complained as well, and management told her that, oh, toughen up, you know. It's so unfair, it's so wrong that they expect us to just roll over all the time. We get it from our clients quite often. We do not need to get it from each other, you know. It's the one industry where they put on the back of the ambulance, violence will not be tolerated. They put in the hospital, violence will not be tolerated. And, you know, and you'll get a security guard slam you to the ground if you're violent there. guess what? We have to tolerate it. We have to tolerate it. It's kind of expected from us to tolerate it, you know. And it's not right. It just never makes it right. But yeah, we do get slapped and we do get spat at and we get all sorts of abuse thrown at us. We do not need to get it from our colleagues as well, you know. We're there to support each other. Absolutely, we need to support each other. And coming behind somebody that gets bullied, and, you know, and stand up for them as well, because we have to stand up. They help to make our job easier. If they get sick and they don't come to work, then we have to carry their load as well. So they support one another as well in that way. So promoting a model of change in the workplace and practices, procedures according to organization policies and procedures. Assume that everyone prefers to feel important, needed, useful, successful, proud, respected, rather than them feeling unimportant, interchangeable, anonymous, wasted, unused, expendable, and disrespected. And sadly, a lot of companies, if you go to them and you say, I don't like this or I don't like that, they'll tell you there's the door. You're so quickly expandable, you know, and replaceable. So it's everywhere. My husband he has an answer for that. He calls it communism. And that's exactly what it is, isn't it? It's just the way. That's just the way things are run these days, you know. It's hard. So we try to be, we always have to ask, what are we trying to accomplish? How will we know how we can change and improve the environment? We act, we plan, we do, we study. So, and on that, professional development activities, we can also benefit with, you know, enhance our abilities, decrease in resistance to change, improve retention, and higher levels of organization commitment. Professional development is the ongoing provision of opportunities to improve skills, competencies, and knowledge. Professional development is often viewed simply as providing education and training. Now, when you are in or IN and you've got a registration, you have to maintain the registration in the year, and they have to do a certain amount of training in the year. So they have that to maintain their registration. It's quite a lot. Oh, it's more than 10 hours, I'm sure. Something I'm not sure if the RNs and ENs have to do. So I also belong to a group called Assume, and they on it's like a website, you can go register yourself, and I do some training on there to maintain my training and assessor compulsories. I have to have compliances and stuff, so I have to do a certain amount of training in a year and belong to certain groups and do a certain amount of industry work as well to stay current in what I'm doing. As care workers, you don't have to go and redo your Cert 3 when it becomes outdated. When I came to Australia, I did an aged care certificate through open colleges, and that became outdated. So when I started training, I had to redo the individual support training, the Cert 3 again, because that one was outdated. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to keep doing a new one. I think they should actually have a certain component of retraining in that, because now you would have quite a few care workers out there that would have done the aged care certificate. And there's quite a few changes that you are learning that they haven't been taught. So you're going to come in there with new ideas, fresh ideas, and, you know, things from what I teach you, and they're not going to be open to the suggestions because we've been doing it so long, you know. And it makes it really hard. One of the things is that duty of care versus the client's dignity and choice. And, you know, if you go in and you say to them, look, this really creates behaviors. The client has got all these behaviors because you force them to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning. This client is used to sleeping until 10 in the morning. She's a late sleeper. It's what she's always done. Why do you force her to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning? And they're like, well, that's how we do it here, you know? And you know, it's not. It's the client's dignity and choice to stay. Her husband even says that she's always gotten up late, you know? So, and then they don't want to accept that. And then that client has bad behaviors through the day. She would, you know, they all the toys out the cart and not be happy with you all day because you forced her to get up at 7 in the morning, you know.
Make it easy on both of you.
Yeah, just go with the flow. You know, don't force people to do things that they don't want to do. And sometimes the old carers don't get that. So, yeah, you don't know what's happened. Yeah. 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 And the rule of, dementia care, we had a huge rule on that. If somebody's sleeping, you don't wake them up. Just don't wake them up. If they wake up by themselves, then that's fine, you know. So we did this already in the UK, so I've been exposed to it for many years. But coming here, the first few years, there was this rigid way. You know, the kitchen wants you to get people up and get them finished, and they have to have breakfast at a certain time. And, you know, and we had a lot of issues with that, trying to train the old staff that we don't do it like that anymore. That's one of the biggest hurdles you'll face. So, and that's all got to do with them not keeping up their skills up to date, you know. Ways of doing that, I'll skip that, is I'm going to the back now, so it will come up just now, but I'm just mentioning it. Ways to keep your skills up to date is to just look at notice boards in the company, in your office. There might be a flyer up that at the base they're having some training this week I've heard about, but I haven't been able to follow up on that. They're doing some wound care and dental care, and I think the other one is palliative care. They're doing at the base this week. I've done that set of units together a few years ago at Shepherd Lodge. Also, they had somebody that came and did that with us. And normally when they offer these kind of trainings, it would be a full unit like you're doing, and it would be free, and it would be offered by Queensland Health or Aged Care or NDIS or one of those, and it would be paid for. So you'd be able to go and access that and you know, put that onto your resume. Like with palliative care, you guys, part of the disability individual support certificate, palliative care is not one of the units you do. If you do age, you would do palliative care as a unit. So, but you can anytime. I've done a palliative care course with the Mater Hospital. They've had a day there. I've done disability, dementia training, a Cert 4 dementia training through Dementia Australia. That also came up on a flyer in our staff room. I think there's a new one coming. I just got an email from Dementia Australia that recently that they're coming again to Mackay. They come from Townsville or sometimes from Brisbane, and then they come and they have a course. It's normally a 4-day course. And yeah, and that's really nice. They always put food and all sorts of things. And yeah, and you get your certificate. I like the food. So yeah, then you get this course, and it's actually then paid for, and it's nationally recognized, and you can put it on your resume. You guys will be doing some little things with Jerry. She'll be doing NDIS training and little extra bits and pieces, which is really great because you can add that on your resume. You need to do that in any ways. If you start working in a disability, you have to do the NDIS training, but most companies get you to do that. If you haven't done it through us, they get you to do it. but which is good that Jerry already is going to help you to get all of those on your resume. Those are not compulsory. They just, additions that helps you to get placements in the industry easier. And being, up to date with what's happening, so that's really good to do that. When you need any feedback or you need any advice, just ask. Don't be shy to ask. Ask the colleagues, ask your supervisor, ask. Look on the notice boards. And then again, as I said earlier, if you join the union also sends reminders out of training that's happened around, they've got some training coming up and you'd be able to access that and keep up to date. It's always nice to be up to date with what's happening, The aged care quality standards, when it came out last year, it was compulsory. A lot of companies done that. Did you do that? The new aged care standards? No? You would know if you've done that. So we had to do that at Good Shepherd, and the whole of the house had to do that, including the cleaners, and everyone had to come and do it. Yeah, that's fun.
I don't want it to get away or something.
So yeah, the new disability standards will probably come out by the end of this year. At this moment, it's fair. It's not, it's a bit more extensive than what they've shortened it, and they've added, they sort of combined some of the standards. It used to be 12 standards, it's only 8 now. So they've combined some of them, made it a bit shorter and made the whole structure of it a little bit easier to understand. So, and then compulsory training would be your manual handling training once a year, fire safety, things like that. What else do you do? Yeah. Yeah. First aid. Yeah, first aid is another one. Yeah. Yeah, you get that automatically.
Oh, do we get that through?
You get, yeah, it comes with your blue card. You just have to get with it. Yeah. But your blue card, we'll be able to, and I think that's what Jerry does. She'll apply for a blue card for voluntary, but when you start working, you have to apply for a full one. So, and most companies will help you with that. They will help you get that done. So, and each company these days you work for sends you for a police check as well. So you get, even if you just go from 3 months from this one to that one, they do a police check again. It's funny that they haven't updated the Australian system with that yet, because in the UK, we did this 11 years ago when we immigrated to the UK. They did a biometrics scan. So they put all of that into a computer, and then you don't have to ever do that again because it's biometric, and they even take your blood sample and stuff. So whenever you I forget how they check up on it, but anyways, it's just done once, and it's then electronic. So
Once your fingerprints are done, you don't have to do anything.
yeah, your criminal history, yeah. So you have to keep doing that. Yeah. And you've got something on your blue card, it's there for 5 years, so you can't work then for all that time. So self-evaluation is an important tool for self-improvement and managing yourself at work. Many companies hold yearly reviews, as we just said, and sometimes evaluation can come from your colleagues as well. At Good Shepherd, we're busy with our yearly compulsories at the moment. It normally runs October, November, and we can't get shifts if we haven't done our compulsories, and it's a 4-hour training they do for us. So it's just the fire safety and the manual handling things. I do manual handling with you guys in December. I will rent all the equipment, so I'll do all the lifters and all of that. and then we will do the police. We will do the first aid, and the first aid you have to keep up to date anyways. That's yearly thing. So that's,
CPR is yearly.
yeah, part of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
they always do it together, so I'm not sure why they even separate those. You do them together.
They do it together.
Yeah.
Every year you have to update CPR, but the rest of it we don't have to.
Yeah, but then you can't just go update the CPR by itself, so it's a bit of a shame anyway. So you have to do the whole thing together anyways. It's 3 units in one. Yeah. So that's evaluation. Skills, knowledge and development. Informal may also come and looking at notice boards and sometimes on the internet. Like I said, that assume that I've got what do you call it? Pay like a fee for and every month, and then they send me training on the internet, and I can just lock that, and it automatically locks my hours. Every time I go and do a bit of training, it locks the time that I've spent on that training. So that's very helpful, like a membership or something. And then being a union member, and then some companies have an educator. At the Shepherd we have an educator. Yeah. Won't say much. Not online. But some companies have an educator, and you can go, your educator will then also come to you and say to you, well, this, we get a little calendar every month going out with some education that's going on in-house, whether it's like yours, if you're going to be working with elderly people, then you might land up learning how to do blood pressure and that type of thing, and they'll do a little course on that. If you've got a client with diabetes, you'll learn how to do a diabetes checks every day. But it's little short courses that companies will send you to do that. So that's the end of this unit, and I hope this has been helpful. Any questions?